Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the cafe. Thank you guys for joining me again today. I appreciate you guys so very much. I hope you're all having a great day. Um, uh, thank you all. I see you guys jumping in here that were over at Doodles. Thank you guys for supporting her as well in another amazing video that she put out because she does amazing job over there. So thank you, Doodle, for that video. I see you here too. Guys, today we're looking at, since this morning I didn't get a chance to do it, doing coffee in a cold case today about Mary Bobo Shin, if anybody is familiar. It's a very, very interesting case. Where is she and what happened? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I appreciate you guys joining me for it. Guys, please hit the like button as you come through the door. Share it out. Let everybody know what we're doing, if you will, please. And thank you. And that being said, well, you know the rest. I'm not going to say it anymore. Let's do it. Hello, 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 and welcome back once again to the cafe. Thank you guys for joining us for coffee in a cold case. It is afternoon, but hey, I drink coffee all day, so I don't know about you. And you don't have to drink coffee. You can be drinking whatever you want to drink. If you want to drink whatever you want to drink it because you can drink that, whatever it is that you want to drink. It might be coffee, it may not. Are you confused yet? Because I am. I don't know if Mama Bear's joining me or not. What the hell is that? Hey, there's a new addition to StreamYards. You can add scenes. Wow, that's interesting. Cool stuff, guys. I think they need to just get their basic stuff right and then worry about adding things, in my opinion. So let's see who is here with us. Again, Doodle, great job again, as you have been doing amazingly. Every video that you put out is just amazing, even your live streams. So great stuff, and thank you for doing what you do. I do appreciate you so very much. I appreciate your videos and your time and everything you're doing. So thanks, my dear. Appreciate you. And thank you for being here, because she is here. Doodlebug in the house, guys. Tomboy Charm in the house. Stephen with SW Collectibles in the house. Miss Stormy, welcome back to you. Peggy Brainbog, good to see you today again. Mystic Butterfly, wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. I think I just saw Taylor. Miss Taylor, welcome back. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Miss Jenna, Justice for Crystal McCrory Jones. Yes, absolutely. And thank you for joining us, Jenna. It's wonderful to see you. It's been a minute. I'm trying to get back to doing the afternoon stuff, you guys. It's little by little. I'm gonna try to work it back in if I can fit something in here in between, because there's so many other great stuff, great places to be and great things to see. So yes, yes. Welcome, Jojo. Good to see you. Miss Sherry's there. I see her. Miss Wisdom Speaks. Thank you. Appreciate you being here again, guys. We're looking in today to the cold case of Miss Mary Bobo Shin. Actually, she went by Mary Jimmy Bobo Shin. She had a couple different nicknames that went missing. It's a very strange situation in her case. So
I figured you guys would definitely want to hear about this one, and hopefully we can bring some awareness to it again to bring it back out, being that it is a cold case that doesn't get very much attention that I saw. Um, Texas doesn't have mountains. No, it just has heat like hell. It's very hot there. I'm gonna push this Tesla down the highway. Oh Lord, Tom, you don't need to be doing that, Tom boy. You weren't feeling good yesterday, and you're out worrying about that stuff. Come on now. Again, thank you guys for joining me, guys. Please hit the like button, share this if you will, if you could. I appreciate you very much for that. All right, give it just a few more minutes to see if anybody else pops in before we get started. I don't want to have anybody have to go backwards. 80 in Fort Worth. There's no way. Nope, 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 nope. Oh wait, that's too soon. I don't want the cold, but I don't want it that hot yet. A little too warm for me. Just a little. Oh, my house smells amazing right now. My mother. Good God Almighty, save me. My wife is making um barbecued country style ribs. Uh, cauliflower mac and cheese, and baked potatoes, mini baked potatoes. It smells amazing. Just saying. Oops, what's up? Come on, come on, come on, come on. What's up here? Welcome, Mark Schumann. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome, Brandy B. Good to see you, dear. Ms. Rowena, thank you for joining us today again. It's almost done now. Excuse me. 20 people in the house, 14 likes. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for that. Excuse me. Hope you guys, I guess Miss Cassie said they have beautiful weather there today. So that is amazing for any of you that are experiencing that. Good for you. Barbecue, no barbecue, anything for me. Thanks, though. Yeah, I think she's missing the months that we can grill. So they're not being grilled; they're in the oven. 867. Yes, that is nice. It's warmer here today. It's like 46, 47, but it's raining. So thank you, Stormy.
Has anybody in here heard of this case by any chance? Mary Bobo Shin. Stormy says, I'm not sure. I need to see the face. I'm not great with. Oh, of course. Mark says no. Biggie says yes. And welcome, Phil. Meatballs and the best sauce, pasta, parmesan, or subs, grinders, and hoagies, with or without onions and peppers. Amen. It's great stuff either way. Welcome, Phil. Thank you for joining us. Come on in, everybody. Get comfortable, if you will. Um, All right, well, we may be getting started here. I don't know that we're going to get many more peeps in here. Hold on a minute. All right. Hold on a minute, guys. Good evening, Miss Jackie. Mark and Betty, cheers. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining us tonight. There we go. Come on, load up for me. God, I hate when this does this. It's all slow and weird. And sorry, I know I was muted, Stormy. My apologies, guys. I'm getting there. That's just taking. This is loading like I have dial up, you guys. This is ridiculous, and it never does that. Come on. What are we doing here? Oh, Lord, is it going to actually work for me? Okay, hold on.
Ooh, Hawaiian coffee. That sounds good. I love different types and flavors of coffee now. I'm spoiled on that stuff. I love it. Sounds like it would be really good, actually. Okay, I think I know what's happening. The rain, for whatever reason, is doing its thing on was doing its thing on the internet. So as that's loading up, guys, the first thing I want to throw up here, as we have a new Amber Alert, unfortunately. Very, very unfortunately. One moment here. Let me find it. Okay, here we go. One moment. We have well, sorry, it's not an Amber Alert, but it should be. Missing persons, I should say. Chloe Leverett, Christopher Daniel. Okay. Um, so this is based out of oh, it is an Amber Alert. I'm sorry. Based out of Tennessee. An Amber Alert's been issued for 9-year-old Chloe Rihanna Leverett and 7-year-old Christopher Gage Daniel. The children were last seen on Sunday, September 23rd, out of 2012 at approximately 6:30 p.m. by a neighbor. Chloe and Gage lived with their grandparents at 730 Kingdom Road in Unionville, Tennessee. That home was destroyed by fire on Sunday night at approximately 9:30 p.m. After an extensive 5-day search, multiple fire experts have processed the scene and were unable to locate evidence that Chloe and Gage were victims of the fire, which is a good thing. The location, excuse me, of Chloe and Gage is unknown at this time. Christopher's photo was shown age progressed to 17, and Chloe's photo was shown age progressed to 19. So this happened in 2012. Please don't tell me that this Amber Alert is just now coming out. Okay, because she's been progressed to age 19. He's progressed to 17. They were 9 and 7 at the time. This is wild, you guys. Okay, and I thank God that there's no evidence that they passed in the fire, but this is what they would look like now. This is crazy. If this is true, Doodle, what do you? This happened in 2012, and they're just now putting an Amber Alert on this. Are you serious? This is strange. What the hell? Okay. Anyway, this needs to be paid attention to, obviously, because we have 2 children who went missing, and now they're just older children. But still, how did this? There's a fire, they disappear, and nobody has seen them. This is very strange. So, if anybody has any information on this, please contact 1-800 TBI Find or dial 911. Or Chloe and Christopher, if you see this yourselves, please reach out to somebody and let them know that you're okay, or that this is you. If you could, please and thank you. I need to talk to Arctic about this one. This is weird. I've never, well, I mean, I've seen things like this, but the way this has gone down is very strange to me. September 23rd of 2012. And I don't know if this had come out once before and maybe they just reprocessed it or something, but this is strange. I don't know. Stormy's saying, I'm telling you, DFW should have way more Amber Alerts than what we get. Just the population alone. The statistics don't add up, if that makes sense. No, it does. I completely understood. Very strange, guys, is all I'm saying. Very strange and weird. But if anybody knows anything, please, please, please call 1-800-TBI-FINE or dial 911 and say, hey, um, I know what's up with this. Or if you two are out there and you happen to see this, Christopher and or Chloe, please reach out. Please, please reach out. This is very strange. 20 and 22. Hey, Stitches, good to see you. Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand, but I'm gonna look into them a little bit more and see what I can figure out. Just I have questions, you know what I mean? So there is that, you guys, of course. And then earlier, I don't know how many of you are in here that weren't in the other show. I just want to re-show this again. Um, my understanding is there's no change to this, so we also have an Amber Alert that was put out today on Azalea Stripler out of Spring Lake, North Carolina, last seen February 25th of this year. She's 15, 5'4", and 110 pounds, you guys. Azalea was last seen. This one bugs me a little too. She was last seen around 6:15 a.m. yesterday morning, leaving her house in front of her home, near her home, and was believed to have been picked up near her home, like it says, in Spring Lake, North Carolina. She described that blonde hair, blue eyes, and the other alert stated that she is very possibly in danger. Okay. So this is Azalea Stripler. If anybody has any knowledge of anything, you have any idea what may have happened or what's going on, please contact Harnett County Sheriff's Department at 910-893-9111. Um, there's so many of these that drop so often, guys. It's so sad. Unbelievable. Hey, Peaky, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you very much. I'm really confused with this this other one though from 2012. I don't understand what's going on with that, but damn. Okay. All right. We're good there. And there. Okay, we're good here. Let's see what we got here. Thank you guys for viewing those. And maybe something can come from that, I hope. I get one Amber Alert a year, not that I want my phone blowing up with missing kids, but they are not. Yeah, they don't. They don't get put out. Even no matter what state you live in, they don't get put out right. I've been learning that slowly but surely. Let's see here. It's going to work. All right, great. Things are loading. Thank you, Jesus. Appreciate it. Whoever crossed their fingers, it worked. Thank you. Oy vey. That was bugging me. Okay, guys, let's jump up here to this one here.
There's a 44-year-old mystery that still haunts a small city in Columbia County, Arkansas.
Yeah, here's NBC 10's Chelsea Monet with this week's Arklamas Most Wanted.
Magnolia, Arkansas, July 1978. A local art teacher who dabbed in real estate told friends she was going to show a house to a man who responded to her ad in the newspaper. Little did they know that would be the last time they'd hear from their friend again. Mary Bobo Shin was 25 years old when she disappeared.
She walked in and she looked worried, and I said, Miss Shin, are you all right? And she said, well, I'm worried about Bobo.
Cliff Knowles was working as a police dispatcher when Bobo's mother reported her missing. He went to school with Bobo.
So I immediately got on the radio.
Bobo's car had been found behind a local grocery store, and clearly something was wrong.
The car was there, the windows were open, her shoes were on the floor, her purse, all her belongings, everything was just scattered all through the car.
Gravel, dirt, grass. There were some latent impressions.
Fingerprints were found inside, but they've yet to be identified. The sheriff thinks the person who committed this crime is local.
The best timeline that we can put together from the time she disappeared until her vehicle showed back up at Smitty's grocery store parking lot is approximately 57 minutes. So that vehicle didn't go very far.
44 years later, this case may be cold, but it's not closed.
I'll never give up. You know, I mean, the answer's out here.
In a cemetery just outside Magnolia is a head.
Hey, Arctic, thanks for joining, bud. I hope you're being safe out there on your road trip today. Appreciate you, buddy. What's up with that Amber Alert, bud? It's from 2012, and they're just now putting this out. It's very confusing. Very confusing.
Stone in remembrance of Bobo, and though she's been declared legally dead, there's still no closure for her family.
Both her parents died not knowing what happened to their daughter.
If you have information on this case, call the Columbia County Sheriff's Office at 870-234-5655. Over time, Sheriff Lowe re-interviewed witnesses and submitted evidence to the FBI.
Gotcha. Thanks, bud.
DNA technology will produce new leads. For Arklamists Most Wanted on your weather station, I'm Chelsea Monet.
All right, so that was a newer news segment on that one. One moment here. Well, hi there, Cassie. I thought you weren't joining us because you was playing in the weather. Oh, there's SRBB. BB. Thank you for being here, too. It's been an Amber Alert since they went missing. I believe it's the longest. Oh, wow. Okay, got you. Good Lord. I just wondered if that was something that they forgot to put out or what the deal was, but thank you for clarifying that. I was really curious about that. Arklamists News. Yes, Miss Jana. You're still outside. Okay. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I really do. It means a lot to me that you're all here, more than you know. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. All right, now let's load in the next one. Yeah, but that takes me 45 minutes too. Let's see here. Okay, here we go.
Of the next 30 minutes, she was spotted in several places.
Sorry, guys, it skipped ahead a little bit here. Hold on. Let me know how it sounds, guys.
On the morning of Thursday, July 20th, 1978, 25-year-old Magnolia, Arkansas resident Mary Bobo Shin had big plans. After teaching a children's art class at her studio north of the city, she planned to get together with friends, play tennis, and lounge out by the pool. However, when an unknown man called about taking a look at a house that she had listed for sale, Bobo put her plans on hold. The caller, who she never identified by name, explained that his car was in the shop and he'd need to take a taxi to meet the young woman. But when Bobo heard this, she told the man not to worry and that she'd come pick him up from a local convenience store. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, she was spotted in several places in and around the city behind the wheel of her custom blue 1976 Buick Special. Hours later, Friends and family grew concerned when they hadn't heard or seen the 25-year-old. After her mother went out searching, Bobo's car was located abandoned in the parking lot of a grocery store. The windows were down, the doors unlocked. The keys dangled from the ignition, and the young woman's purse had been dumped out all over the passenger seat. A pair of white shoes were found on the floorboard of the driver's side, slightly tucked up beneath the brake and accelerator. The car was scratched up, covered in dust, pine needles, and grass seeds. There was no sign of Bobo anywhere. For more than 40 years, the disappearance has haunted not just her family, but also local law enforcement and the entire city of Magnolia. While some believe the artist and budding house flipper may have been selected at random by a total stranger from an ad she'd placed in the paper, others believe she was likely targeted by a local, someone who knew Bobo, knew the lay of the land, and knew exactly what to do. Was it a case of a kidnapping gone wrong, a targeted and well-planned out abduction, or was it really a random case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? This is Trace Evidence, episode 246, The Disappearance of Mary Jimmy Bobo Shin. Welcome to Trace Evidence. I'm your host, Stephen Pacheco. Today, we begin our 8th year of Trace Evidence with one of the more...
That is the link for the Trace Evidence podcast. If anybody would like to check them out, please do. They put out some really great stories, especially on cold cases, so it would be definitely worth your while, guys. Take a look, if you will, via that link there. Thank you.
Mystifying disappearances I've ever covered. Before jumping into the case, though, I wanted to mention that I'll have an announcement or two at the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around to find out about some new, exciting endeavors for Trace Evidence. With that being said, let's not waste any more time. This is episode 246, The Disappearance of Mary Jimmy Bobo Shin. It was an uncomfortably hot and muggy afternoon in southwestern Arkansas. A slight breeze sweeping in from the east offered little more than a tease of relief that was quickly swallowed back by the oppressive summer afternoon. A thin veil of gray clouds hung over the landscape, like a dusty old blanket whose frayed and torn expanse showed glimmering hints of the vast blue sky beyond. While the cloud cover provided a slight respite from the scorching sunlight, it did little to suppress the grossly sticky atmosphere that shone through in the dark mat of sweat-soaked shirts and flushed faces as locals fruitlessly drew old kerchiefs from warm pockets in an attempt to brush back the dewy sweat beating upon their brows. While some sought out what little comforts could be provided by local pools and the spitting hiss of lawn sprinklers spinning amidst the green grass, those driving more contemporary vehicles rolled up their windows and clicked on the air conditioning for a moment's peace. However, for many, there was no escaping the unrelenting heat as they proceeded on to their jobs or made their way across town running necessary errands. This was true of 63-year-old Harry Irwin, a local man who, when he wasn't operating in his official capacity as the tax collector for Columbia County, was busy maintaining and working the large fields of his farm, then located just outside the city.
No worries, but I would have had you join me, but you're out of town today. If you was home, I definitely would have had you join me because this is local to you, per se, from my understanding. So that's why I was kind of, that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, if we're running this by the time you're home, let me know and I'll bring you up with me for sure.
City limits of Magnolia, the seat of Columbia County. Using the back of his hand to sweep away stray hair stuck to his forehead as sweat poured down his face, the man took a momentary break from the arduous task of baling hay to catch his breath and look out over the expanse of his property. The roadway leading west out of town bent and arched its way, twisting right along the border of Harry's property. And while traffic was thin, to say the least,
Welcome Sunday.
He often saw people as they headed toward or exited from Magnolia. Some cars he recognized, others he couldn't
Welcome,
confirm
Cap.
having seen before, but either way, there was hardly a cavalcade to keep up with. On this particular Thursday afternoon, though, there would be one car that would not only stand out, but the memory of it would haunt Irwin for the rest of his life. It was just after noon when he spotted the blue car moving along the gravel road, kicking up a cloud of dirt and dust in its wake. Irwin watched as the vehicle's speed slowed and then began veering side to side along the roadway. Squinting his eyes, Irwin couldn't make out distinct features, but saw enough to later confirm that there was a woman at the wheel and a man in the passenger seat. They appeared to be arguing and struggling for control of the wheel, which then seemed to be causing the car's wild swerving. Irwin watched as the vehicle appeared to right itself, and the metallic blue gleam vanished into the distance, followed quickly by the dust storm clinging to its rear bumper. At the time, Irwin thought little of the event he had just witnessed. Not long after, he would fully grasp the gravity of what he had seen when he came to learn that Bobo Shin, daughter of a prominent local businessman and member of a well-known Magnolia family, vanished that very afternoon. Her car, with its custom blue paint job, was found hours later, abandoned in a grocery store parking lot. Evidence at the scene suggested the vehicle had been driven through a dusty area and perhaps even a hayfield. What had become of the missing 25-year-old remains a mystery to this day. While more than 40 years have passed, many in Magnolia remember the disappearance and cite it as the day Magnolia lost its sense of safety and security that it had exuded for prior generations.
From an article that I read, that when this went down, which is what I believe he's relating to, when this went down, a lot of people got very uncomfortable within this area because things like this don't happen, back then, 78. And, it was just, with all of these cases we've seen this, it happened a lot like that. So again, it makes sense. And it's sad when people lose their comfort in their locality, their city, their town, wherever, because something horrible happens like this.
Harry Irwin would always wonder what became of Miss Shin and whether or not he truly was the last person to see her alive. Mary Jimmy Shin was born on Sunday, January 11th, 1953 in Columbia County, Arkansas, to parents Gresham and Sue. Mary would go on to be the couple's fourth out of 5 children and notably the last daughter, the baby girl of the family. She grew up with 3 older sisters, Sarah, Linda, and Becky, and later would be an older sister herself to the final member of the family, a boy named Jay. At a young age, Mary was given the nickname Bobo, which permeates the entire record of her life. From official documents to school yearbooks, everyone referred to her as Bobo, and for the sake of keeping things simple, I will do the same from here on out. There are a large number of descriptions of Bobo throughout her youth, but they all tend to agree on several key descriptors. She was a happy, fun-loving young woman who was very close with her family. She loved traveling and was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed swimming and playing tennis, which would become a daily activity for her as she grew older. However, it would be art that captured Bobo's heart and mind most powerfully, and she was quite gifted. From an early age, it was apparent to everyone that, while she could achieve anything she set her mind to, art was forever entwined with her mind and soul. Her ardent love of art would be fed in part through family, as her mother had her own interests in the arts and encouraged creative expression in her children. Bobo grew up in a nice, comfortable home in an affluent neighborhood along Sioux Street, just over a mile north of the city center. Her father, Gresham, was well known throughout the city. He was a self-made man who had overcome many hardships, ultimately becoming a prominent motel contractor who was involved in many of the city's hotel and motel enterprises. While Sue may have passed on a love of the arts to her children, Gresham instilled in them an appreciation for property speculation and development. Sue was also involved in the business side, with it being noted that she had become involved in the hospitality industry along with Gresham beginning in 1949. Together, the couple formed the family business, Magnolia Lodging, and their development of hotels and motels spread beyond Arkansas, with them operating Hilton and Marriott properties in Dallas, Texas as well. The couple would go on to develop more than 50 properties in their lives together. Bobo would take on all sides, possessing both an innate artistic ability and a keen eye for real estate, the latter of which would play an eminent role in the mystery surrounding her later disappearance. As a youngster, she attended Eastside Elementary School. She was active in school and extracurricular activities, joining the Girl Scouts and later the school band. She also became very involved in the church, specifically Magnolia Central Baptist Church, which the family regularly attended and where her mother Sue taught Sunday school for many years. According to everyone who knew her, Bobo was a very welcoming and kind young woman who made friends easily and developed a large circle of friends and acquaintances. Academically, she was as dedicated and gifted as she was to art, earning high marks and a constant spot on the honor roll. As a teen, she went on to attend Magnolia.
I agree, sir. Very, very pretty young lady. Very much so. This one, she was born the same year as my mother, guys, as well.
High school, where she continued to be involved in all manner of activities. Her senior yearbook notes her as belonging to the student council, history club, French club, pep club, as well as being voted into homecoming royalty. Starting in her sophomore year, she became a cheerleader and would later go on to take her place as captain. In the spring of 1971, she graduated from Magnolia High with honors and went on to attend Southern Arkansas University, located less than a mile from the family home. Continuing with her high academic standards, Bobo pursued a degree in art, and in the spring of 1976, she graduated, obtaining a bachelor's degree in studio art. Bobo was a highly talented artist, and many of her works were exhibited at her alma mater, as well as at the Arkansas Center for Arts in the state capital of Little Rock. Her involvement and skill are still honored, with artist exhibitions and rewards to gifted artists being granted in her name. Not long after earning her degree, Bobo opened an art studio in a small home then located at 423 Magnolia Street, just over a mile south of the family home. There, she would paint, display her own work, and teach. At the time, she taught painting, drawing, and art history to both adults and children. Her appreciation for art expanded beyond her own interests, and she took great pride in helping others to find their footing in the world of artistic expression. In addition to her artistic endeavors, Bobo followed in her father's footsteps and turned an eye towards real estate development, but not quite on the same level. Her interests didn't involve building hotels and motels, but rather focusing in on homes in Magnolia that had fallen into disrepair. She'd buy a home, put in the money and work necessary to bring it back to life, and then she would sell that revitalized property at a profit, what today we refer to as house flipping. As a result, many local papers and media reports would later refer to Bobo as a real estate agent, but that wasn't exactly accurate. She didn't own a business, nor was she hired on to sell homes. You wouldn't see her face in the local papers with a house listing, nor did her image appear on for sale signs or bus stop benches. It was a hobby, for lack of a better term, and something her father had encouraged her involvement in as a way to earn money to bankroll her art studio, which was far from a lucrative endeavor, but rather a passion project. Even then, it wasn't the most valuable pursuit, as Bobo didn't want to deal with large homes and high values, rather spending her time working on smaller homes and selling them for an exceedingly thin profit margin. By the summer of 1978, things were going well for Bobo, who was then 25 years old. She lived a busy life between outings with friends, time spent with her family, and balancing her art studio against her real estate prospects. She continued to live in the family home on Sioux Street, and if she wasn't at home or work, there was a good chance of finding her on a tennis court or soaking up the sun poolside at one of her father's hotels. At the time, she frequented the pool of the Coachman's Inn, a property her father had developed, located along East Main Street, just a few blocks south from her studio. One afternoon, While making her way to her small studio, she came upon an older home in need of restoration. Located at 718 East McNeil Street, the home was less than half a mile from her studio, 2 blocks to the north. It was a small 2-bedroom single-family home just over 800 square feet, which had originally been constructed in 1949. Bobo knew a good project when she saw one, and over a period of weeks she put in the elbow grease where she could and hired workers to complete tasks she wasn't quite up to. When work on the house was done, she took out an ad in the Magnolia Banner News. There were no photos, just a straightforward write-up which read, "Beginner's Delight, 2-bedroom, completely remodeled, good location." The ad listed the McNeil Street address and a number to call for interested parties. That number would ring the Shin family home. The ad first appeared in the paper on Friday, July 14th, 6 days before the disappearance. On Saturday, July 15th, just the next day, an unidentified man caught the attention of a clerk at what was then the Townhouse Motel. Located at 301 East Main Street, the townhouse was a Shin family property located across the street and just west of the Coachman's Inn. Door to door, the 2 buildings are 331 feet apart, and both motels are within clear view of one another. According to an employee at the townhouse, a white male with a beard stepped out from a white car and entered the lobby. Another person was seen waiting inside of the white car, while the bearded man picked up a wall-mounted payphone and appeared to make a few different calls, though details are sparse. The employee would later tell authorities that this unknown bearded man then approached the front desk and specifically asked the female clerk if she knew where Bobo Shin hung out. When the clerk replied that she didn't know for sure, the man turned and exited the lobby, apparently getting back into the white car and driving off. At the time, the employee found...
Welcome, Miss Paula. Good to see you today. What was the question I missed? The way he read, I thought hospitality was something different. Oh, I don't think so, Sunday. I think it was just how he read it, I guess. I don't know, but I don't think so.
Sounded strange, but nothing to be overly concerned about. I should note, no specific time has ever been reported for when this encounter happened. On this same day, though, Shin reported that she had answered a call from an unknown man who wanted to know where her daughter was. Sue explained to the Shreveport Journal, saying, quote, "He said he had talked to Bobo about trading a house that he had, 7 or 9 miles out on the Taylor Highway for one of her houses. He asked me where Bobo hung out. I told him Bobo didn't hang out anywhere, that she was usually either here or at the studio." End quote. The call was brief, but odd enough for Sue to mention it to her daughter when she arrived home later that day. According to Sue, Bobo didn't have much of a reaction and made no references to the caller or his identity, if she knew it. At the time, it was brushed aside, with Bobo noting that if the caller was serious about the house, he'd call back. Whether or not the unknown man ever rang the Shin family home again is unknown. The next few days seemingly passed with little of note for Bobo. She spent her time as she often did, teaching, working on her art, hanging out with friends and family. Whether or not anyone else called about the home on East McNeil Street between Sunday and Wednesday has never been reported, and there are no confirmed sightings of the unknown bearded man during that time period either. On Wednesday, July 19th, the day before Bobo's disappearance, she received a call from a man who expressed interest in purchasing the home. Much like the sighting at the Townhouse Motel, there is no officially released time for when this call happened. However, it was confirmed that Bobo agreed to meet the potential buyer at the home so he could get the full tour, and that meeting occurred at approximately 4 p.m. Sue and Gresham later noted that Bobo didn't mention the viewing to either of them, which generally meant she didn't think it would go anywhere. Sue explained later, saying, quote, "She didn't mention his name, and any other time, she probably would have. She acted like she probably wouldn't see him again, like it was not a big prospect. If she thought it was important, she would have talked it over with her father." End quote. This seems to suggest, at least from Sue's perspective, that Bobo likely didn't believe there was going to be a sale made. For what reason she felt that way, we have no way of knowing, and given the circumstances, she shared no details with her family or any of her friends. No names were given, no terms discussed. It ultimately appears that for Bobo, the showing had fallen flat and she had no expectations moving forward. On the other hand, there had to have been some kind of an interaction between the two, which opened the door for continued discussion about the McNeil home, because as we will soon learn, the potential buyer was given the phone number to Bobo's Magnolia Street art studio and arranged a time to call the following day. Thursday, July 20th, 1978 began as a warm, clear morning with blue skies and temperatures in the upper 60s. Shortly after sunrise at 6:19 a.m., temperatures would begin a steady climb, reaching the 90s by early afternoon, and with that scorching heat came a sticky veil of humidity and graying clouds. According to Sue, that Thursday began as most days did, with she and Bobo rising early and setting out on their normal morning walk at approximately 6:30. She recalled her daughter being dressed in cut-off blue jeans and tennis shoes, though there was apparently nothing that stood out as unusual or worth remembering during their walk and morning chat. After arriving back at the family home, Sue told Bobo that she would be heading off with one of her sisters to visit a family member in Hope, a city located approximately 40 miles northwest of Magnolia. Bobo's plans for the day, at least in what she told her mother, were simple. She'd be driving over to her studio where she was set to teach a children's art class that morning. Sue would be haunted by that morning, not because of an eerie feeling or anything of concern that jumped out at her, but because of how completely normal and casual it was.
You as
She
well,
later noted, quote, "I went on and got ready to leave, and she was in her room getting ready to go. I just went by her room. She told me to have fun." End quote. She never imagined this would be the last time she'd ever see her daughter. The curse of hindsight often retroactively transforms even the most normal of moments into mysteries, where those desperate for answers become lost in the fog of unknowing, hunting for red flags or hidden clues with even the most conventional of encounters. Bobo's movements for the next few hours following that walk have never been reported if they're actually known. The 25-year-old next shows up in the record at 10 a.m., when she began teaching a children's art class at her Magnolia Street studio. Shortly after 11 a.m., Angie Pendrick, a good friend of Bobo's, called her at the studio to check in and confirm plans they had made to play tennis that afternoon. Angie detailed the conversation to the Magnolia Banner News, saying, quote, "She said, after answering the phone, that she thought I was the man who was supposed to be calling her. She said that if it was to be the man who was looking at her house. I asked her to come to my house. She said that she would if the man didn't want to see the house right away. I hung up quickly so that she could get her other call." End quote. Bobo reportedly stated that she was expecting the man to call around 11:15. Around the same time that Angie was on the phone with Bobo, an unidentified man entered the Easy Mart, a convenience store with a drive-through window then located on the northeast corner of East Main Street and North Dudney Streets, just over half a mile south of the studio. The store was then located directly across Dudney Street from Smitty's grocery store and north across Main Street from a car dealership, Jordan Brothers Pontiac Buick, then at 621 East Main. The unidentified man approached the counter and presented cash, asking the employee to make change for him so he could make a phone call. At 11:15 a.m., a witness who works across the street from the Easy Mart reported seeing the unknown man standing in front of the building using the public payphone. At that same time, the phone began ringing at the art studio and Bobo answered, having a short conversation with a man on the other line before hanging up. She then called Angie back, who noted that Bobo told her that the man had a home and some property outside of town that he was interested in trading for her property on McNeil Street. Angie explained, quote, "She said that his house was 9 miles out on the Taylor Highway. I asked her if she would want a house that far out since it would require so many trips in order to fix it up. She said she might want it for her boyfriend. I think she told me that this man had offered to take a taxi to her studio because his car was in the Pontiac place. She started to tell him to walk across the street and she would meet him at the Easy Mart. She told me that she would be over to my house at 1:30 p.m. if she were through. She never acted as if anything was unusual. She was rushing the conversation and acting as if she was getting ready to leave right away. End quote. At the conclusion of this phone call, Bobo made a statement which at the time didn't feel all that urgent, but given what would happen later, has made everyone wonder if perhaps the 25-year-old had some reservations about this potential buyer. Angie would tell authorities that before hanging up the phone, Bobo said, "Come looking for me if I'm not back this afternoon." Much of this call is corroborated by Bobo's sister Becky, who noted that she heard her sister tell the man that she would pick him up, and she also heard the chilling request to look for her if she didn't return. 5 to 10 minutes after making plans with the unknown caller, Bobo called another friend to break their plans to get together, noting that she had a house showing instead. Reportedly, she explained to this other friend that she would see her at a swimming party later that afternoon.
These people, I see this another one too. I feel like she should have taken somebody with her in a situation like this, at least in my opinion. And I think a lot of these real estate agents should never do this alone, in my opinion, ever.
Sometime between 11:20 and 11:30 a.m., Bobo left the art studio, and it's presumed that she made the short 4-minute drive north to the family home on Sioux Street to change clothes, not wanting to meet the buyer wearing cut-off jean shorts and a t-shirt. I say this is presumed because no one knows for certain when exactly Bobo stopped home to change her clothes, but the clothing she had been wearing earlier in the day were located at the house after her disappearance. From this point forward, I should note, the timeline gets a little weird. There's a lot happening at similar times, and much of it is based on witness statements, so all of the times are rather approximate. There will likely be some discrepancies stated, but we'll address those later on in the episode. Between 11:30 and 11:40, a witness spots Bobo pulling into the Easy Mart, at which time an unidentified man got into her car. The vehicle was difficult to miss. She drove a 1976 Buick Special with a custom blue paint job. Also, between 11:30 and 11:40, another witness reported seeing Bobo and the unidentified man arriving at the McNeil Street house. This witness stated that the two spoke outside of the home for a few minutes and then went inside. Around 10 minutes later, the two emerged from the home and drove away from the property. If this witness is correct with the time, this would have Bobo and the unknown man leaving the McNeil house between 11:40 and 11:50. 10 minutes later, at approximately 12 p.m., an employee of Jordan Pontiac Buick stated that he saw Bobo and an unknown man pulling out from a gas station located on Main Street. After pulling out, the vehicle is noted as proceeding west, last being seen stopped at a traffic light at the intersection of Main and Pine Streets, 0.3 of a mile from the Easy Mart. All of these locations are in close proximity, and even given the modern geography of Magnolia, the drive from the Easy Mart to the McNeil Street home, back to the Mart, to the gas station on Main, and then to the intersection of Main and Pine covers just 1.3 miles, and it would take no more than 6 minutes to travel to those locations in that order. If Bobo and the unknown man did spend 10 minutes in the house, give or take, they would have left sometime between 11:50 and 11:55. It's then another 4-minute drive to the intersection of Main and Pine, putting the vehicle there around 11:59 or 12 o'clock, which fits with the witness account. The next alleged sighting of Bobo takes place at approximately 12:05. This is when Harry Irwin, the Columbia County tax collector, is baling hay on his property and claims to see a vehicle fitting the descriptions of Bobo's swerving along the roadway as a man and woman appear to be fighting for control of the wheel. The distance from the intersection to the location of Mr. Irwin is a 6-minute drive, which fits in with the 12:05-ish sighting. Bobo is never seen again after 12:05, and no one knows with any level of certainty where she and the unknown man may have gone. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Sue arrived home with another of her daughters and noted that Bobo wasn't there. She would later state that she found her daughter's absence somewhat concerning, as she wasn't aware of any plan she had to be out, and Bobo almost always left behind a note explaining where she had gone to. Sue's concern began changing into worry over the next few hours, as several of Bobo's friends called the house looking for her. Then, at 4:30 p.m., Angie Pendrick called the house somewhat annoyed that Bobo hadn't showed up for their get-together. It was during this conversation that Angie explained the circumstances about the potential buyer to Sue, and she became very worried for her daughter's safety. Hoping to track her down, Sue drove over to the art studio but found the lights off and the door closed and locked. Considering what Angie had told her about the earlier chat with Bobo, she then made her way to the Easy Mart, but no one there remembered seeing the 25-year-old. From there, Sue walked across the street to Jordan Pontiac Buick. The dealership was preparing to close as it was nearing 5 p.m. Speaking to the manager, Sue inquired about the prospective home buyer who had told Bobo that his car was being worked on at that location. The manager then explained to the frantic mother that there were no cars being serviced at that time, and he had no knowledge of anyone dropping their car off at the dealership that whole day. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sue went back to her car and drove home to make a few calls looking for her daughter. Just after 5 p.m., the manager of the dealership closed up the business, locking the door behind him. He then got into his car, planning to drive home, and he proceeded north onto East Main Street and then made a right turn onto North Dudney, passing the Easy Mart on his right. Looking out the driver's side window to his left, the man quickly spotted a vehicle which closely resembled Bobo's. She had purchased the car from his dealership, and he remembered the custom paint job. The man pulled into the parking lot of Smitty's Food Mart directly across the street from the Easy Mart. Approaching the vehicle, he pulled open the driver's side door, which was unlocked, and leaned into the car. Reaching in, he opened the center console and saw paperwork with Bobo's name on it, confirming that this was in fact her car. Armed with this information, the man got back into his vehicle and made the quick drive over to the Shin family home. Arriving at the home on Sioux Street, the manager explained to Bobo's mother that he'd found the car, and she immediately picked up the phone and called the police to report her daughter missing. Shortly after that report came in, then Arkansas State Trooper Ron Stovall stopped by the Magnolia Police Department and was informed about the missing person's call. He later explained, saying, quote, "If I recall correctly, Jim McInnes, a city officer at that time, made mention that he thought he had spotted her car down behind Smitty's. He and I drove down there, and it was her car." End quote. According to the official record, Trooper Stovall was the first officer on the scene at approximately 6:30 p.m., and when he saw the car, he got a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. Before making any big moves, Stovall contacted Lieutenant Finis Duval with the State Police Criminal Investigation Division, then located in the city of Hope. Finis agreed to come down that night and begin working the scene alongside Stovall and State Police Investigator Russell Welsh, who had been assigned as chief investigator. Bobo's car was found sitting in a parking space of the lot of Smitty's Food Mart, approximately 150 yards from the Easy Mart where she had originally picked up the unknown buyer. Examination of the car revealed several interesting details which gave detectives the belief that Bobo had likely been the victim of some kind of foul play. The doors had been left unlocked, the windows were rolled down, and the keys were dangling from the ignition. Bobo's purse, which has been described as both blue canvas or blue denim, was located inside the vehicle, and it appeared the contents had been dumped out on the passenger seat, with some spilling onto the floorboard. Her wallet was there, cherry red with a snapping clasp, and inside were business cards, photos, and a small amount of cash. Her driver's license was located along with a stick of Wrigley spearmint gum in a black and white wrapper. Additional items found included a bank receipt, a cheap black paper address book, and a cigarette case which contained an open pack of cigarettes, Kent Golden Lights, with only one cigarette inside. Bobo's sunglasses were found on the seat, which was concerning to the family as they noted that she wore contact lenses, and those contact lenses caused mild light sensitivity, so she never went anywhere without her shades. Next, The Thornbirds, a 1977 novel by Colleen McCullough. Perhaps one of the more fascinating yet cryptic clues came in the form of Bobo's shoes. The white pair of size 8 tennis shoes were located on the floorboard of the driver's side, somewhat shoved up under the pedals. Mike Lowe, an Arkansas State Police investigator, had a few ideas about the placement of the shoes, later telling the Batesville Guard, quote, "These shoes were found kind of up and under the brake and accelerator. A lot of girls will be driving along and take one shoe and reach over and kick off their shoes and drive in their bare feet or socks. That's how these shoes were. She felt relatively comfortable with the person in the car with her." End quote. For their part, members of the Shin family didn't agree with Lowe's analysis. Her older sister Linda stated that she had never known Bobo to take her shoes off while driving or to drive without shoes at any time in the past. Sue had another idea, considering the belief that Bobo had gone home to change. She explained, quote, "I feel like she might have run home and changed her clothes and changed her shoes in the car. She did that sometimes when she was in a hurry." End quote. Two items conspicuous by their absence were Bobo's appointment book and a yellow air mattress she often used when sunbathing at public pools. Investigators theorized at the time that the suspect's name or other information leading to his identity may have been contained within the appointment book, causing him to take it. It was also possible, though, that the book had been lost during some kind of a struggle, which may have occurred elsewhere if indeed an abduction had taken place. What sinister implications there were from the absence of the air mattress were not commented on publicly. While the contents within the car implied certain possibilities, the exterior told its own cryptic story. Dust, dirt, and scratch marks were found on both sides of the car, as well as the undercarriage. The paint near the rear left fender had sustained deep scratches, and particles of seed fragments were recovered in the score line. The scratches appeared to have been caused by low-lying bushes, brush, and branches, suggesting the vehicle had been driven off the road and through a wooded area. The off-road travel was further confirmed by the discovery of grass seeds in the car's radiator and pine needles trapped in and under the grille. There were also reportedly several sliced pieces of grass found inside the car. Investigator Mike Lone noted, quote, "The vehicle had been driven across a hay meadow because the belly pan was wiped clean and the doors had been opened, and when they closed the doors, it snapped some of the grass off." End quote. Once the initial examination of the car was completed, the vehicle was taken into police custody and transferred to the Arkansas State Crime Lab in Little Rock. At the time, the lab, which had only been created 1 year earlier, operated out of the state police building, taking the entire third floor and part of the basement. Forensic examiners spent a great deal of time processing the vehicle. In addition to dusting for prints, the vehicle was thoroughly vacuumed, and all particles collected from the carpet and upholstery were analyzed through additional testing. Ultimately, much of the lab report showed negative results, but a few key pieces of evidence were recovered. Several unidentified hairs were found, and 3 partial prints were lifted from the rearview mirror and the glass of the driver's side door. Unfortunately, they could not eliminate the possibility that the prints belonged to Bobo, as they did not have hers on record for comparison. Investigator Lowe explained, quote, "These are the latent print impressions that came off her car. They tell us that they're female, about 90% sure that they're female. We think they're Bobo's, but she was never fingerprinted, so we have no way of knowing for sure." End quote. They did attempt to get her prints, going to the family home and dusting items that had only ever been handled by her, but they were unable to obtain a print detailed enough to be used for ruling the others in or out. To date, the prints recovered from the car have never been identified. There were, of course, a few issues with the state of the vehicle and analysis of the scene. Firstly, it was known for certain that the manager from Jordan Pontiac had entered the vehicle and fumbled through the papers. Police did not know if anyone else may have opened the car or moved items around inside. While the contents of Bobo's purse being dumped out could have suggested a struggle, or perhaps that the suspect was looking for something suspicious, there were some doubts about the legitimacy of that purse being dumped out. According to Chief Investigator Russell Welsh, they began wondering if maybe the purse had been dumped by an onlooker or perhaps even one of the police officers who had been first on scene. According to Welch, that suspicion was confirmed when 2 weeks later, a Magnolia police officer admitted that he had dumped out the purse while searching for identification to confirm the vehicle's owner. Investigator Mike Loeb would later state that all of the officers he had questioned who had been present that night denied ever touching the purse. Discovery of the car and subsequent examinations by local and state authorities, while not quite conclusive, convinced most working the case early on that Bobo had likely been the victim of foul play, perhaps an abduction. Action was taken quickly, as within hours of the car being found, Mike Kennard, then 13th Judicial Prosecuting Attorney, reached out for assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. At the time, the FBI agreed to handle and investigate any leads that might come in from states outside of Arkansas, leaving that part of the investigation to state and local authorities. For investigators within the state, they were determined to get down to a more concise timeline of events, as well as aiming to interview potential witnesses in and around locations where it was known Bobo had visited in the hours leading up to her disappearance. While some were canvassing areas, others were involved in boots-on-the-ground searches, which targeted more rural areas of Columbia County to the north, west, and south of Magnolia. According to multiple reports, Bobo planned to pick up the unknown man at the Easy Mart the day she disappeared, and so investigators went down to the small store to interview employees as well as customers who may have been there around the same time as Bobo. The clerk, working behind the counter, explained to police that she had seen a man using the payphone outside of the store at around 11:15 a.m. She described the individual as a white male, clean-shaven with a potbelly and dark curly hair. The employee was asked and agreed to sit down with a composite artist to create a sketch of the unknown man. That sketch would become just one of many contained within the police file, some allegedly of the same man, and others of different individuals described by other witnesses. Mike Lowe would later note the reliability of the Easy Mart clerk, saying, quote, "She was a pretty good little witness. She got a pretty good look at him, and she remembered a lot. Was real calm." End quote. However, there was another witness who was able to provide investigators with even more information. This witness was the daughter of the store's manager, who was present and remembered seeing the man using the payphone. According to her, the caller had originally entered the store and asked for change, a quarter specifically, so that he could use the phone. She went on to tell police that the man had spoken on the phone for approximately 5 minutes. She described him as a white male, thought to be in his mid-20s, standing approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, with dark, naturally curly hair. She's described him as heavy-built and slightly overweight. She was also able to report that the man wore a white shirt, possibly a t-shirt, and faded blue jeans. Asked if there was anything specific about the man which stood out to her, the witness replied that he had a slow, lumbering walk, which she went on to describe as lazy-like. Learning about the call made from the phone, authorities reached out to the phone company in hopes of learning additional details such as when precisely it was made and how long it lasted. Unfortunately, due to the way the telephone system was at the time, since the call had been made to a local number, no record of it was kept. Heading west across the street from the Easy Mart back to Smitty's Food, investigators spoke with several employees who were working the afternoon and early evening the day of the disappearance. Two of the people they spoke with delivered very similar stories, each reporting independently that while they hadn't seen Bobo or her alleged abductor, they did see the car. According to their statements, they first noticed the missing woman's car parked in the spot where it would later be found by police at approximately 1 p.m. Another employee working as a stock boy at the time told police he first noticed the car in the parking lot at 1:30. Given that other witnesses would place Bobo and the unknown man in her car driving through town between 12 and 12:05 p.m., the 1 p.m. sighting of the car in the parking lot would suggest that, whatever the crime, it had been conducted in a little over an hour, accounting for driving the vehicle back to the food mart. Later authorities would narrow the timeline even more, determining that between the last sighting of the missing woman and the 1 p.m. sighting of her car, no more than 57 minutes could have passed. This would therefore imply that, taken outside of town, the suspect could have traveled no further than 29 minutes before returning, and even that estimate leaves no time for whatever was done to Bobo herself. Investigators would find another witness, this time someone who claimed to have seen both Bobo and the unidentified man during their stop at the McNeil Street home less than 30 minutes before the 25-year-old's disappearance. While this person's statements would play a major role in guiding the early days or even years of the investigation, more than 4 decades later, law enforcement officials would note that at best, they consider the account unreliable and perhaps at worst, completely inaccurate. Regardless, this witness ultimately became a key source for detectives, and his statements functioned to bulwark earlier theories that would fail to live up to either the passage of time nor the stringent critiques from experienced investigators who pointed out multiple inconsistencies which remain unaddressed to this day. The witness was a carpenter who was working on a home across the street from the McNeil Street home on the morning of the disappearance. By his own statements, the witness placed himself approximately 75 feet from the property that day. According to his account, at approximately 11 a.m., he saw a blue car fitting the descriptions of Bobo's Buick Special pulling up to the property, arriving from the west. This time created some confusion as investigators knew for certain that at 11 a.m., Bobo was still at her studio awaiting a call from the potential buyer. When pressed further for the time, the witness acknowledged he didn't look at his watch, and he could have seen the car arriving any time that day between 10:30 and 11:30. The carpenter went on to state that a woman exited the blue car, and he later identified Bobo from a photo as the woman he saw that morning. According to him, a second vehicle pulled up within minutes of Bobo, which he described as being a Pontiac, any year between 1969 and 1979, dark green with a lighter green vinyl top. He also suggested it could have possibly been a 1972 Bonneville Catalina or maybe a heavier model Pontiac like a Le Mans. This second car reportedly arrived from the east. The witness stated that a man emerged from the second vehicle who he described as being a white male, 25 to 28 years old, standing 6'1" to 6'2", and weighing between 215 and 225 pounds. He went on to say that the man was heavy and fairly wide across the shoulders. He had dark brown, collar-length hair and a medium-length beard with a mustache. He was wearing a baseball-type mesh cap. The carpenter stated that the woman and the man proceeded into the house, were inside for between 10 and 15 minutes, and then exited. At that point, he claimed the woman got into her car, the man into his, and both drove off from the property heading west on McNeil. There were a lot of questions about this witness's statements, primarily his insistence that Bobo and the unknown man arrived in separate vehicles. This directly conflicts with statements from other witnesses who spoke with and or were present when the man called Bobo at the art studio. How, investigators wondered, was it possible that she needed to pick up the potential buyer and was actually seen with him in her car, if indeed they had arrived in 2 separate vehicles and his was allegedly being worked on at the Pontiac dealership? In fact, an employee of Jordan Pontiac Buick would later tell police that he was on break when he saw Bobo arrive at the Easy Mart across the street. He explained, quote, "Sometime around the middle of the day on Thursday, July 20, 1978, I just happened to notice a man standing by the telephone outside the Easy Mart across the street. A car pulled up to him, which looked just like Bobo's car." End quote. Unfortunately, the employee didn't get a great look at the caller, who he would only describe as a white male, 25 to 30 years of age. In addition to these discrepancies, it was noted by investigators that not only was the carpenter 75 feet from the property at the time he saw the comings and goings, he had poor eyesight and wore very thick glasses. Then, there was the issue of his sighting being comprised in the form of mistaken identity. 2 houses down from the property at 718 East McNeil lived a local man who worked as a welder. He was in his late 20s, wore a mesh baseball-style hat, had a beard, and drove a dark green 1968 Chevy. This man was interviewed by police and confirmed that he left work for his lunch break that day, as he often did, and arrived home on East McNeil Street at approximately 11:30 a.m. According to investigators, this guy fit the details of the carpenter's description, but when he was shown photos of the welder and his car, he denied that he had been mistaken, and instead insisted that Bobo had arrived separately from the unknown man in the unidentified dark green car. Investigators were less certain about the discrepancy, yet the carpenter's description would be taken as gospel. A detailed composite drawing was created based on his description, and this unknown, large and heavy, bearded man with long hair, a hat, and a dark green vehicle became the target of a massive search. Tipsters began calling in, delivering the names of every bearded man they knew in the area. Police set up roadblocks, questioned people who drove by prominent locations in the case over the course of the next few days. Anyone behind the wheel of a green vehicle and any driver or passenger with a beard was given special attention. Investigators requested records from the Department of Motor Vehicles and ran down every green car in the area which closely or even partially matched the description given. As it turned out, it wasn't all that extensive of a search, as there were few of those vehicles registered in and around Magnolia. None of the cars or owners interviewed could be conclusively linked to the crime or to Bobo herself. In the days following the disappearance, expansive searches were conducted, and their size and scope continued to grow. The Magnolia Police, Columbia County Sheriff's Office, State Police, Arkansas National Guard, and FBI scoured rural areas of the county on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was estimated that Sunday's search, the largest to that point, involved more than 300 individuals who combed the landscape on foot, horseback, and four-wheelers. There were even searches from the sky, with the addition of helicopters operated by the Civil Air Patrol, and the local citizens band radio clubs also participated. For the most part, these searches focused in on south and southeastern Columbia County. On the same Sunday that the largest of the searches was executed, authorities received a call from Harry Irwin, the tax collector for Columbia County. Irwin would report at that time that on the day of Bobo's disappearance, he had witnessed a car fitting the description of her Buick Special behaving oddly just outside of town. Irwin, who at the time was baling hay on his property just west of Highway 132, said he saw Bobo's car pass by on the dirt and gravel road, Columbia 32. According to his account, the car was traveling between 10 and 20 miles per hour, and there was a woman at the wheel and a male in the passenger seat. He believed there to have been some kind of a struggle inside as he watched the car swerving from side to side along the road, and he saw what he believed to be a fight for control of the steering wheel between the man and woman. Whether or not Irwin actually was the last witness to see Bobo alive has never been determined, but the sighting would haunt him for the rest of his days. Irwin passed away 2 years later, never knowing with any certainty what exactly he had witnessed that day. Mike Lowe, years later, would note that while they found his account probable, it was difficult to confirm, if possible. He explained, quote, "Harry went to his grave thinking he'd seen the abduction taking place, and he may have. Whether he did or he didn't, we don't know. It was hot, and he had his equipment to keep an eye on. That old farm equipment, it'll buck you if you're not careful. So whether he saw it or not, we'll never know. But he very well could have. And that does put it in a direction that interests us now." End quote. Regardless, there would be multiple searches launched within the area Irwin specified in 1978, and over the years, many more searches would focus in and target that area, not solely for Irwin's sighting, but because there were hay fields and wooded areas that certainly could have been where Bobo's car had been driven off-road. There were, of course, other witnesses who offered up curious, fascinating, or simply unbelievable accounts of what they had seen or heard. A female clerk working at Smitty's told investigators that on the day of the disappearance, she saw two college-age kids forcing a female into a four-wheel drive vehicle behind the store. According to her, she thought they were just fooling around, so she took no action. Another witness driving through Magnolia that day told authorities he believed he saw Bobo's blue car heading south out of town, but noted he didn't see a passenger or anything suspicious. Monday, July 24th, 4 days after Bobo disappeared, her family hired a Shreveport, Louisiana-based private investigator named Bill Gray. Speaking to the media, Gray announced that the Shin family were putting up a $25,000 reward for information leading to Bobo's return. It was also noted that the family was installing a special phone line in the house, which would function as a hotline for tipsters to call with whatever information they might have. Speaking for the family, Gray noted that they were not going to stop in their pursuit to bring their beloved daughter and sister home, telling the local media, quote, "We're just trying to do anything we can. Anyone with information is asked to call us. We will keep all information strictly confidential." End quote. On this same day, Chief Investigator Russell Welsh informed the local media that they were seeking a potential witness.
Thank you, SRB.
Allegedly, on the day of the disappearance, a deaf man was in the area of the Easy Mart selling pencils at the time Bobo picked up the unknown driver. Though they could not say with any certainty if the man had witnessed the pickup, they had been told by additional witnesses that he had been standing within 15 feet from where Bobo and the man had been, and it was believed he might have gotten the closest look at the suspect to date. This story ran in local papers for several days, but if the deaf man was ever identified and interviewed, it was never officially confirmed. Later, in the evening of the 24th, a tip was called in from a bus driver operating out of Shreveport, 80 miles southwest of Magnolia. The driver claimed to have seen a woman, closely fitting Bobo's description, on a run he had made west to Houston, Texas. While investigators worked to track down others on the bus to see whether or not they could support the driver's account, Bobo's brother Jay, her boyfriend Willis Stroop, and her brother-in-law Wayne Newton, no, not that Wayne Newton, traveled to Houston and managed to track down the woman from the bus driver's report. Not only was it not Bobo, but the woman had blonde hair and was traveling with a young child. Though things didn't work out for them, the three were determined to track down every possibility, no matter how far-fetched it might seem. On Tuesday, the 25th, investigator Welch stated that they were just beginning to break the surface on a huge stack of leads that needed to be tracked down. They had received dozens of calls since the disappearance, and a lot of information had been delivered, though much of it probably wouldn't pan out for them, according to Welch, who would tell reporters, quote, "We're checking out everything. I've got a stack of leads here on my desk, and we're keeping busy. But so far, nothing." End quote. During this interview,
Sadly and truly, you guys, I'm sure, can agree to this, for those of you that have been around for a minute. In 1978, this could have been anybody, you guys. I mean, the hair, the beard, look at him. Truly, in that time, that could have been anybody. Any man with dark hair would look just like this guy. So just saying. Captain Jenks says that back in those days, the only place to have cameras would be a bank or a casino. If even then, Cap, that's true. Very true. Very hard to say that. You know what I mean? And yeah, right. It was absolutely 100%. So it's very hard. Like, you could look at that guy and go, yeah, I saw him along with 55 other people that look just like him. You know what I mean? So that's the hard part. Hey, Danny, good to see you. Yeah, it does kind of have like a Chuck Norris look to him. I agree. Billy Jack Haynes. Stop it, Walt. But yeah, Danny, I agree wholeheartedly. That was in 1978. That was the style, folks. So damn, how hard would it be, you know?
Review. Welsh for the first time made mention of a new composite drawing.
I was 4, Sherry. So 14 and 4. Hell, I might even, well, I know my dad looked that way. That my dad looked just like that guy in 1978. I promise you. His hair might have been a little bit longer. That's the only difference. Good to see you tonight, Dandy.
The one that was created based on the carpenter's description. They hadn't yet revealed that drawing to the public, wanting to show it to other witnesses first, but Welsh expressed a lack of confidence, noting that the picture, quote-unquote, looks like 1,000 people. Days earlier, they had released an extremely vague composite, seemingly based on the descriptions of other witnesses, showing a clean-shaven man, short and heavy, with dark curly hair seemingly matching the man making the phone call at the Easy Mart's payphone. 3 days later, on Friday, July 28th, they officially released the Carpenter's sketch. This one was quite different from the original, showing a man standing over 6 feet tall and weighing more than 200 pounds. Interestingly, this composite describes the suspect as having dark hair and a dark, red-tinted beard. This adjustment of the beard color was a new detail which had not been previously revealed, although many working the case still believe this was a description of the welder living on McNeil rather than an actual suspect. Following the release of the sketch, the Shin family also jumped into action, increasing their reward for information from $25,000 to $35,000 the next day, Saturday the 29th. Just for the record, adjusted for inflation, $35,000 in 1978 would be more than $170,000 in 2025 money.
That's a lot for a reward.
Hoping to contribute in whatever way they could, Gresham Shin informed the media that he had been along on several searches with law enforcement, scouting along roads in Columbia County as well as neighboring Lafayette County. Gresham described his experience, telling reporters, quote, "What you do is you drive down these little roads, go as far as a car can go, then you have to get out and walk," end quote. The hope was to find the scene of the crime, something investigators had been working without since day one, or perhaps some sign or trace of where Bobo may have been taken. Monday, July 31st, marked the final day of the month and nearly 2 weeks since Bobo had disappeared. Investigators found themselves pulled in countless directions, receiving tips about every bearded man who lived in the area and many who could not be identified.
And there it is. Like I said, every man in first off, beards were very popular then, winter or summer. And that's got to be at least 100 people that could fit that description at that point in time. So that had to be near impossible, in my opinion.
Let alone tracked down. Leads took them all over Arkansas and even into Louisiana and Texas.
You too, Miss
Russell
Paula.
Welch
We love you
described
too.
the tips following the release of the second composite as little more than a witch hunt.
That's funny you said that. I was just going to say that when that picture came out, I wonder how many guys said nope and shaved that beard off because they didn't want to be the one to be looked at. You know what I mean? 100%. That's a great point, SRB, because I know I probably would have been like, nah, I don't want to be in there because everybody looked the same. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely.
For any bearded man. He relayed an example of the tips they were working with, explaining that a woman working at a store reported seeing a suspicious bearded man. He explained, quote, "It's hard to follow up on a lead like that, but I went to the store. I talked to the store manager. I've had little old ladies tell me a bearded man."
Agreed. I mean, I would hope that you probably wouldn't have a beard like that anyway, SRB, but I mean, yeah, I agree. I would have too.
Drove up next to them at a stop sign and looked at them kind of funny. For a while, everyone who had a beard was a suspect. End quote. Welch himself traveled to Shreveport to question a suspect in another case after local law enforcement expressed that he fit the suspect's description and had committed a similar style crime. However, the detainee had no connections to Magnolia, and Welch found nothing to place him in town the day of the crime or any time around it. That suspect would go on to be charged with first-degree murder in connection with the killing of Meridian, Mississippi women several weeks prior. Investigators had somewhat of a misinformation problem inhibiting them. All across the country, it was being reported that Bobo was a real estate agent, and any police department dealing with missing or murdered real estate agents called in whenever they arrested a suspect. The problem was, Bobo wasn't a real estate agent, at least not in the same sense. She didn't advertise, her photos weren't in the paper, there was nothing about her local ad that they felt would make her specifically stand out as a target for someone going after real estate agents. As a result, they had to sort through a great many tips and suspects whose MO ultimately did not match that of the man they were seeking in connection with the disappearance.
My point exactly. There it is. That description accurately described 95% of adult males, 60% of male high school students, And well, 10% of the women too. So yes, Bill, 100%. It makes sense.
Considering the small town feel of Magnolia, for the most part, residents struggled to accept the possibility that Bobo could have been targeted by one of their own. And that sense of disbelief even stretched out to some of the investigators, who felt certain that they had to be looking for a stranger, someone passing through the city. It was theorized that Bobo may have not been targeted, but rather was the victim of a drifter or random person who just happened upon her ad for the house on McNeil. For his part, private investigator Bill Gray completely disagreed. There was a lot of talk in the media about Bobo being abducted by what reporters referred to as a random pervert, their words, not mine. Gray felt that the crime hadn't been spur of the moment or improvised, rather saying it seemed more likely that the crime had been thought out and planned. He explained, saying, quote, "A random pervert does not act like that. It's a spontaneous thing. They don't care who they grab," end quote. While true in some cases, over the last 4.5 decades, it's been learned that while some predators target at random, others have specific requirements or desires that the victim must fit before they act. This would be Bill Gray's last media appearance working for the family, as after failing to develop any solid leads or suspects, they moved on. The second PI they hired came out of Dallas, Texas. Joe Daniel Smokey Joe Smith had a notorious reputation which preceded him. He had worked on multiple different roles in law enforcement and law enforcement adjacent positions, including but not limited to bail bondsman and deputy constable. He had also had his run-ins with the law, approximately 30 of them, for everything from communicating threats, verbal abuse, and theft. It was suggested that Smith had success in his private investigations in part because, due to his own sometimes unlawful actions, he had connections to what at the time was referred to as the criminal underworld. Smith had a difficult path cut before him, coming into the case late and needing to do a lot of work to catch up. By mid-August, nearly a month after the disappearance, the case was already grinding down to a standstill for investigators, both local law enforcement and hired privates. The tip line, which had been installed in the Shin family home, had dried up from what was once a flood to just drips and drabs, with it being noted that they had dropped from hundreds of calls in the first weeks to less than 10 calls by the early days of August. Multiple witnesses, family members, and friends of Bobo were questioned by police, and a whole slew of polygraph examinations were conducted. In some instances, desperately hoping to enhance information on potential suspects, witnesses were asked to undergo hypnosis in an attempt to sharpen their memories. The search for Bobo and or her abductor began transforming from an above-board police investigation into a desperate hunt, wherein rights and laws were sometimes not followed by those charged with enforcing them. One example would involve State Police investigator Lieutenant Finis Duval. On Friday, August 18th, the state police were conducting aerial searches of an area south of Magnolia when they thought they had stumbled upon a key piece of evidence when they spotted a dark green car hidden amongst the trees of a wooded area. Lieutenant Duval arrived at the scene and, without warrant or authority, decided to pry open the vehicle's trunk for any signs of Bobo, but instead, he found an empty space and no traces of evidence. The car was confirmed to belong to Magnolia local Bill Holmes, and while police considered him a possible suspect at the time, they quickly realized a major flaw. Holmes had reported his car stolen 2 weeks before Bobo had disappeared. Lieutenant Duval's actions caused quite an uproar in Magnolia, where people were already beginning to feel like the investigation was becoming a different kind of animal. Aggressive searches for any and all bearded men resulted in a lot of the male population shaving off their beards to avoid what they described as harassment, not just from local authorities, but also friends and neighbors who became suspicious of them. Ultimately, Lieutenant Duval's actions and Holmes' complaint would be heard before the Columbia County Quorum Court, a legislative body in the state of Arkansas made up of 15 justices of the peace serving 2-year terms. Holmes himself spoke before the court, pointing to the unlawfulness of Duvall's actions and asking out loud, are they going to tear up every green car they see? These actions and the backlash erupting from them seems to have weighed heavily on law enforcement who, for lack of a better description, began reining things in, and public discussion and media interviews about the case became fewer and fewer. As police grew quiet, Gresham Shin applied ample pressure to local officials, stopping in daily to the city-county investigator's office. Shin reached out for assistance, speaking multiple times to the head of the state police as well as Washington, D.C. investigators. Shin even spoke with the Arkansas governor, hoping to get more done about the investigation, and partially in response, a task force was sent from Little Rock to Magnolia. However, they left within a week, noting that there was almost no solid evidence to work from and leads had previously dried up. Chief Investigator Welsh was conducting a very thorough but necessarily methodical search, and the task force simply wasn't designed for such an investigation. Despite the continued investigation and additional searches of areas all around Columbia County, little progress was made, and the case continued to dwindle. August and September would yield no solid results, and by the arrival of October, nearly 3 months since the disappearance, Welsh acknowledged that they had...
That's a really good point, Cap. Maybe she was pulled out of the car and used her feet as an anchor, and under the pedals is why her speed. That's a very good point. Good looking out. Good looking out. You guys are paying attention. That's a good point. Well, Cap, sorry. Absolutely.
Run down more than 300 leads, and not a single one of them had helped advance the case. Seemingly, state and local authorities agreed that things were drying up, and the state police reduced the amount of officers assigned to the case from 6 to 1, Russell Welch. Still, Welch noted, the investigation had been expansive, and beyond the known searches, he confirmed that law enforcement had scoured more than 1,400 ponds in the area, but had found nothing. For the most part, the year of 1978 would come to its conclusion with little if any solid developments. In May of 1979, 10 months following the disappearance, Chief Investigator Russell Welch officially left the case, transferring out of Magnolia to the city of Mena, some 150 miles away. At this point in time, State Police Investigator Mike Lowe took over. Lowe had already been working the case for a period of time prior to taking over. He came into the investigation with great drive and determination, as well as a personal interest. Lowe was a Magnolia native and had attended Southern Arkansas University during the same period as Bobo. They even shared a history class together and knew one another on an acquaintance basis. Unfortunately, by the time Lowe officially took over, the case was already rather cold, and original leads and pursuits needed to be revisited. October of 1979, 15 months since the disappearance, would become a pivot point in this case. It was this month when the Shin family terminated their agreement with PI Smokey Joe Smith. They quickly moved on to their third PI, this time hiring William Deere, also of Dallas, Texas. Deere quickly traveled to Magnolia and brought 5 investigators along with him. He set up an office at the Coachman's Inn, one of the hotels the Shin family had worked on. The private investigator quickly learned that things in Little Magnolia didn't quite operate the way he was used to. He explained, quote, Magnolia was different. It was and is a very private, closed little town. Usually, you go into small towns like that, offer money, and people will talk. I've been known to cut money in half and say, you'll get the rest when the information checks out. I'll have scotch tape for them when it does. And in the 1970s in Magnolia, $25,000 was a lot of money. But in Magnolia, the money didn't work.
That's another good point there, Cap. Her sneakers pitched to the left, being that they were pitched over to the left side as they were, would mean that she was pulled out of the right side through the passenger door. That makes perfect sense, yes. Jesus, Cap, maybe you need to be a detective, sir. Notice the things like that. Wonder if they did notice that too. Good point.
End quote. One of Deer's first acts was the creation of a brochure which contained many photos of Bobo and went into the details of her disappearance. These brochures were plastered all over town, in businesses, in store windows, on trees, and phone booths. Deer and his team even spent time at Smitty's Food Mart, where the car had been found, handing out the brochures to shoppers and passers-by. Included in the brochure were mentions of the Shin family reward and numbers to call with information. Unfortunately, the arrival of William Deer and his aggressive investigation tactics would deliver a result that never seems to assist but only ever hinders the search for missing persons. The case would become, as Deer would later describe it, a political football. On Friday, November 2nd, Deer announced to local media that he expected a break in the case within 1 week. He and his team, beginning that weekend, planned to search approximately 75 wells located throughout the area. They would also focus on ponds and other bodies of water, reportedly using what, at the time, they called a new type of bloodhound that can detect human bones, or what we would call today a cadaver dog. According to Deer, there was more information available in Magnolia than what local authorities were reporting, claiming that he had received several letters from locals providing additional details. 3 weeks later, Deer reported that he had developed a suspect, who he would describe as both a genius and a brilliant guy. Deer's suspect would later be identified as 27-year-old Michael Glenn Morse of Stamps, a city 20 miles northwest of Magnolia, located in Lafayette County. Deer claimed that he had statements from multiple people which had led him to Morse, including witness accounts that the man had made statements about the crime, looked very similar to the composite drawing, and had allegedly shaved off his beard in the days following the disappearance. Morse's name has been bandied about previously, mostly through local rumor and speculation. At the time, there was a structure located in the woods south of Stamps known as the Hippie Hut. Morse was reportedly associated with that spot, and Deer theorized that Bobo had likely been taken there. Even more than 4 decades later, ghost stories persist about the missing 25-year-old haunting that spot. There was, of course, one major issue with investigating Morse as a potential suspect.
Wow, thank you so much, Walt. You definitely didn't have to do that, my friend. I appreciate that so very much. God bless. So very generous of you, sir.
Sunday, October 15th, 1978, Morse was found dead along Lafayette County Road 34, 2.5 miles north of Stamps. Reportedly, he died as a result of a self-inflicted gunshot wound fired from a .90 Winchester pump-action .22 caliber rifle. The rifle was rather long for what some would consider a probable weapon to use for a self-inflicted shot, and at least according to some, the scene itself did not agree with the official ruling. Rumors circulated around the death, with Morse's family denying it had been self-inflicted, and with other officers present at the scene allegedly telling people that Morse had been found with his hands folded across his chest, suggesting the scene had been staged. But what actually is rumor versus legitimate fact is quite unclear. According to Deer, his key witness was the much-debated carpenter for whom the second composite sketch had been constructed. Another witness supporting the accusation was a former employer of Morse's who claimed that on the date of the disappearance, Morse had taken the day off because he claimed he needed to meet with his real estate agent in Magnolia. Morse's father, Dewey Morse, passed away at the age of 59 on Friday, June 2nd, 1978, just 5 weeks before Bobo's disappearance, and William Deer would later state that he had been informed by a psychic that Morse had killed her and laid her body in the grave with his father.
Thank you again, Walt. It really does mean a lot. It's very much appreciated, and it does go towards helping me to keep this running. So thank you, sir. It's so very generous of you. I appreciate you.
Specifically, that she would be found lying on top of the casket. According to Deer, he reached out to both Dewey's wife and Michael's widow and was granted permission to dig up the grave and conduct a search. On Tuesday, November 21st, Deere and his investigators, along with several representatives of local and state law enforcement, arrived at Columbia County's Western Cemetery in Emerson, 18 miles southwest of Magnolia. While law enforcement had made it clear, publicly, that they did not think Deere was on the right track, they still thought they should be present. Deere did, however, have some support from prominent names in the area. Sam Tatum, director of the State Crime Commission, joined with his investigation and publicly supported him, as did Tommy Robinson, director of the State Department of Public Safety. Ultimately, though, after the dirt had all been turned over, there was no sign of Bobo located, and before Deere could even address the growing line of reporters gathering at the cemetery, law enforcement officials were already getting into their cars and leaving, noting that the lead had been little more than a rumor that had successfully suckered in this supposedly skilled and experienced private investigator. Despite the lack of a result, Sam Tatum continued to support Deere, suggesting to the media that the lack of finding Bobo's remains did not deter him nor Deere from their beliefs that Morse was responsible. He would later tell the Times, quote, "Until we find a body, we don't have a crime. However, there is very little doubt left that we know who did it." End quote. In one interview, Tatum described Morse as a former acquaintance of Bobo's, though friends and family never confirmed this. By my own research, the only connection I can find between the two.
Yes, Dandy, I agree. Very, very pretty young lady. And it's very sad, I'm sure many people were attracted to her for that reason, and it brought a lot of attention to her that was unwanted in a sense, obviously, in this sense too. Horribly, that's sad that you can't be, an attractive young woman or an attractive young man and not draw negative attention towards you that can relate to things like this. You know what I mean? It's very sad that that's a thing, but it's true. Sadly.
Is that they both attended Southern Arkansas University, and there was some.
See, the Janice said this is closer. I see that they're referring to these places as parishes, which is where Miss Janet was from Justice for Crystal McCory. So yeah, she knows these areas too. But yeah, agreed. We love you too, Miss Paula. Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't respond to that earlier. It is very sad, Sunday. It's very sad. That's a sad thing that you cannot be an attractive young woman or an attractive young man and not get negative attention for it in one way or another. Do you know what I'm saying? That's just a horrible thing. And vice versa. You get, if you're not a Barbie doll looking or just so, and you are not as attractive per se, or you have some kind of a physical defect or something that draws negative attention as well, and people are just the opposite, and they still, you know what I mean? So people shouldn't treat each other and go at each other in this sense, guys. It should just be about who we are, and we should respect and love each other for that, and that's that, period. So just a few. Okay, so this is really close to you. Absolutely. Wow. Had you ever heard of this, Jana? I mean, I know this is probably before your time, but had you ever heard about around you, anybody talk about this case at all? Just out of curiosity.
Overlap. However, the grave exhumation would bring a lot of heat and attention down on Deere and Tatum, as Morse's mother, Corinne, and his widow, Norma, filed.
That's another reason why I wanted to bring this out, because that when I looked back at it, there are a few videos and podcasts, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't seem like it got the amount of attention it should have gotten over the period of time that it's gone cold. So hence the reason probably why it has gone cold in some senses.
A $2 million lawsuit against both men, claiming an invasion of privacy and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the two women, while Deere had approached them about exhuming the grave, he had lied about his reasons and never suggested that he believed Michael had played any role in the crime. At the same time Deere was making claims about Morse being involved, local law enforcement made it clear to the media that not only had Deere failed to share any of the so-called evidence he possessed, he also hadn't spoken with anyone at the prosecutor's office. Prosecutor Mike Kennard asked about Deer's allegations, noted that he had been trying to get information out of the private investigator, but found him secretive and unwilling.
Which makes no sense to me. Why would a okay, anybody please answer this question for me. Why would a PI that has been brought on to find out this information and in a sense help the families and or law enforcement to find the answers to this, why would a PI keep all that secret? Especially from law enforcement or the district attorney for that much, you know what I mean? That's very odd to me, and I had read that in the article when I read this story. Not this, but like it was an actual newspaper article and so on and so forth. They talked about that too, and why? Unless you have something to hide, why are you being so secret? And it made me wonder. And I've heard of stories before where private investigators and other people, guys, we know this. We've talked about other cases where they do things like this, have inserted themselves into a case basically because of their own personal involvement, and they want to know what's going on, and it gives them the ability to know everything that's popping around. So interestingly enough, and I know I'm not trying to start a conspiracy theory on this, but what else makes any sense? You know what I mean? So I'm curious as to why. That may not be the reason, guys. I'm just saying it. I have questions specifically about that because you don't hear about that kind of thing, or at least you shouldn't, you know, and when you do, there's usually some form of a nefarious answer to that question. So
willing to share. Kennard told the Shreveport Journal that he knew the suspect Deer and Tatum had in mind and, quote, I intend to see that Mr. Deer brings to my office any evidence that he has which may point to a crime being committed. And if he refuses, I'll exercise the subpoena powers. If they have evidence regarding the crime or evidence which points to a specific suspect, then I expect them to make it available to this office. End quote. Still, Deer did not present any evidence to Kennard or state or local officials. Columbia County Sheriff John Blair joined Kennard in his calls for transparency, noting that he and his office had worked the case hard for the previous year and 4 months, and they found it not only insulting, but possibly illegal for the private investigator to be concealing alleged evidence of a crime. Much as Kennard had, Blair called Deer's bluff, saying to reporters, quote, this situation has gotten out of hand as far as publicity goes. If Deer has got all the evidence that's been reported in the papers, then why hasn't he brought this to me? End quote. Sam Tatum, in response to the request for evidence, told the media that he had shared everything he had with Sheriff Blair, as well as his own father, Wade Tatum, the then sheriff of Lafayette County. According to Sam Tatum, it was Sheriff Blair's responsibility to take that evidence to the prosecutor's office. But there was only one.
good point, Danny. Not really helping solve a case to keep the money coming. Right. Kind of strange, isn't it? Exactly.
Problem. Sheriff Blair denied that Tatum had ever delivered even a scrap of evidence to him, saying, quote, I don't know how much they've got. They may have a full deck, but if they do, I sure don't know about it. End quote. In regard to this discrepancy, Tatum would later say that in actuality, all of his evidence was in his head, and that Deer was the one who was actually in physical possession of it. According to prosecutor Kennard, the first time they had heard about any of this so-called evidence was when William Deer held a press conference which Kennard watched from his office alongside Sheriff Blair and Lieutenant Finis Duval. According to Kennard, all three men had the same reaction. They were perplexed by Deer's statements and had no idea what the alleged evidence he had was. Tatum began to pull back slightly, stating that he was involved in the investigation as a private citizen, not as the director of the State Crime Commission. Further, he noted he was very experienced with law enforcement, having grown up around it and having been commissioned as a deputy sheriff in both Columbia and Lafayette counties. Kennard replied that, given those statements, Tatum had no statutory authority to be conducting or participating in criminal investigations, nor was he vested with the power of arrest. Frustrated, Kennard told reporters, quote, if Sammy is working for the sheriff of Columbia County, It seems strange to me that the sheriff was as perplexed as I was. And if Sammy has entered into some sort of investigatory cooperation with Bill Deere, then they should be turning over their evidence to the proper law enforcement authorities." End quote. The war of words from both sides would continue in the media over the course of the next few weeks, and while public support initially stood behind William Deere, the more time passed without him handing over evidence, the more people began to doubt the veracity of his claims. Many people had heard the rumors about Michael Morse possibly being involved, but no one had produced a shred of evidence to support that claim. A few weeks later, in early December, reporters asked Kennard if he still intended to subpoena the evidence in Deere's possession, but Kennard dismissed the possibility. He noted that, as far as he and investigators were concerned, Deere didn't have any evidence to support his wild theories, and it would be a waste of time and taxpayer funds to subpoena him. Russell Welsh, the former head of the case, was contacted about the possibility of Morse having been involved and replied that he found that highly unlikely. Welsh noted that they had previously interviewed Morse following an anonymous tip saying that he matched the suspect's description. According to Welsh, Morse did not match the description and also had a solid alibi for the day of the crime. Robert Compton, a lawyer hired by the Morse family, said Deere and Tatum's actions had been despicable, and they were merely trying to point the finger at a man who wasn't around to defend himself in some desperate attempt to claim a reward and the prestige for having solved this case. For some, that didn't seem like such a stretch. William Deere had previously garnered a great deal of praise for solving another missing persons case. He had been hired on to locate a 16-year-old from a prominent Michigan family who had disappeared, and Deere made a lot of statements about the case in local papers. When the 16-year-old saw the story, he immediately called home, not realizing his family believed him to be missing. For his part, Deere took credit for solving the case within just a few days.
And that there could make some sense if you're just trying to pull clout and or money. We see that happening in cases nowadays all the time, where PIs are coming in and providing fake information or saying that they have information, charging people thousands of dollars to help these families, and they do nothing. And it's very sad to me. Right, Danny. Like I said, that was pretty much everybody in 1978 that was male.
Regardless of how much truth there were to any of the claims made by Deere or the witnesses who had gone to him, Mike Kennard determined it was in the best interest of everyone for the state police to conduct a more thorough, albeit post-mortem investigation into Michael Morse and the possibility of his involvement. Lead investigator Mike Lowe, Lieutenant Finis Duval, and Richard Branch of the state police interviewed more than a dozen people throughout the investigation, and everything they learned led them to believe that Morse had played no role in the crime. While they could find no solid evidence to confirm he had not been involved, they couldn't find anything to suggest that he was. During the investigation, they reviewed all records connected to Morse and found that he had previously been interviewed not once, but twice by two different law enforcement officers. Multiple witnesses signed statements saying that at the time of the disappearance, Morse...
Only when you don't speak for a while, Peggy, but thank you for coming back. Appreciate you.
Had been clean-shaven and did not fit the description of the suspect. However, two women, both working as secretaries for ASU, stated that Morse had come in to re-enroll in classes on Wednesday, July 26, 1978, 6 days after the disappearance, and that he had a beard at the time. In fact, they noted that he had complained to them that he believed he was previously questioned by police because he had a beard. For Lieutenant Duval, it was another example of the complexity of the case and the contradictory information they had to work with, as he would tell the Batesville Guard, quote, "We've got people who will swear that he did not have a beard at the time, and here are two people who will swear that he did," end quote. Now here's where things take an interesting turn. Duval went on to note that following the first interview Morse participated in, the officer who questioned him reported the discussion as a negative interview. which Duvall explained by saying a negative interview means the officer has ruled out the person being questioned. According to Duvall, when this officer was asked why he had ruled Morse out, he couldn't remember what his reasoning was. The second interview had been conducted by a familiar name to this case, former Chief Investigator Russell Welch. Welch also ruled Morse out, and when asked why, he told Duvall that Morse had given him what he felt was an airtight alibi. However, when asked what that alibi was, Welch couldn't remember and apparently made no mention of it in his original report. So here, you have two investigators, independent of one another, clearing Morse of involvement, yet neither can remember why. You'd think someone's alibi, especially if it's airtight, might be the kind of thing you'd write down in your report, but what do I know? I'm no detective. But that's not all. There's another little nugget of information regarding interviews with Morse that I personally found myself struck by. It's related in one news article, pretty much as an almost throwaway line, but it rings to me as very interesting. According to the Magnolia Banner News, in an article published decades after the crime, Russell Welch claimed that while he had interviewed Morse prior to his death, it might actually not have been in relation to the disappearance. Instead, Welch suggested, the interview may actually have been the result of a call police had received from the Shin family. Allegedly, after speaking to police the first time, Morse was really upset about being questioned, and he proceeded to make a quote-unquote vicious phone call to Gresham Shin, where he shouted and expressed his anger about being bothered by investigators. So, you have a possible suspect identified by multiple witnesses as matching the description of the suspect. At the same time, you have multiple witnesses saying the exact opposite about him. Digging deeper, there are a few interesting tidbits about Morse which were not at the time made publicly available, but which came out over the next few decades. Firstly, Morse was allegedly a diagnosed schizophrenic who believed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. He was, at the time, supposedly under the care of a psychiatrist who operated out of the city of El Dorado, 35 miles east of Magnolia. Reportedly, Morse was prescribed an antipsychotic medication that he needed to stay on. According to Deere, he had originally told the media that the tip he'd received that led to exhuming Morse's father's grave was given to him by a psychic, but in order to protect his actual witness, he had lied. Deere later stated that a nurse who worked for the El Dorado psychiatrist was actually the person who had called in with the tip. According to the nurse, Michael Morse himself stated that he had been involved in Bobo's abduction and murder, and that is why she contacted Deere. She was not the only person who told Deere that they had overheard Morse speaking about his involvement in the crime, but whoever the other witnesses were, they've never been named, nor have they come forward publicly, as far as we know. For Deere, Michael Morse is his only and primary suspect. He and his team of investigators came to this conclusion following multiple searches, including lowering themselves down into old abandoned wells and complete interviews with between 500 and 600 people. Mike Lowe, state police, local authorities, and even Bobo's family disagree and do not believe that Michael Morse played any role in the disappearance. That is pretty much how things stand to this day when it comes to the possibility that Michael Morse could have been involved. He's officially been cleared by investigators for reasons no one can remember, and while the behavior of private investigator William Deere might not be exactly by the book, he did obtain statements from witnesses who confirmed their belief that Morse was involved. Despite the growing debate about the reliability of the carpenter's eyewitness account, he signed a written statement confirming that he identified Michael Morse as the man he saw Bobo with. That statement reads in part, quote, "On November 12, 1979, I was shown several photographs of different male subjects by William C. Deere and Associates of Dallas, Texas. At this time, I voluntarily state that I have positively, without a doubt, identified a photograph of one Michael G. Morse as being the male subject I saw with Miss Shin in the 700 block of East McNeil Street in Magnolia, Arkansas at about 11:30 a.m. on July 20th, 1978. End quote. Lead investigator Mike Lowe, however, doubted the ability of the carpenter to make a positive identification, especially considering more than a year had passed since he saw the suspect. Lowe questioned the claim, saying, quote, "Could you identify somebody you saw for just a few minutes 16 months before, especially if it was somebody you didn't know? No, you probably couldn't. When doing a photo lineup, you lay the photos out. And if you keep looking at one, or touching one, or signaling to one in some way or another, your witness will too. And what other photos did he use? Did the other people in those pictures match the suspect's description? You can't put 4 pictures of a clean-shaven guy in and 1 picture of a bearded guy. You can't do that. And I don't know what kind of lineup he conducted." End quote. Deere, in subsequent interviews, would claim that the case was never solved not because of a lack of knowledge or effort, but because of a battle for credit. In his opinion, local and state investigators did not want him to come in from out of town and solve the case from under their noses. He argued that police and prosecutors had done everything they could to sabotage his investigation, even going so far as to pressure witnesses. He explained, saying, quote, "They'd follow me around, see who I was talking to, and tell them not to talk to me. I think they knew people would tell me things they weren't likely to tell the police, and they were afraid I would solve it before they did." End quote. While Mike Lowe stated that he never told anyone not to speak to Deere, prosecutor Mike Kennard made a quasi-confirmation when he told local papers that while he didn't tell witnesses not to speak to Deere, he did tell them they had no obligation to speak to the private investigator if they didn't want to. In particular, Kennard stated that he was contacted by members of the Morse family who wanted to know if they were legally required to answer.
You know, the funny thing is I've been saying how this photo looks like just about every male in 1978 that had any form of a beard, even though these both these sketches look like 2 different people. They still have that same look. I mean, hell, look at me right now. You know, if my hair was styled a little bit different, I would look the same way too. You know what I mean? And to think about that in 1978, the sketching, it's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. It's wild.
Answer Deere's questions. In January of 1980, William Deere was interviewed about his role in the investigation, at which time he described it as a political football, saying, quote, "The case is being used as a political tool to further someone's political ambitions. Kennard wanted everything turned over to him. He wanted to put it all up on his walls and solve the case himself." End quote. Kennard denied that claim, noting that he was finishing up his current term and then he was retiring from public office altogether. Asked about a desire to boost himself, Kennard simply replied, quote, "All I want is for the Shins to be satisfied." End quote. At the same time, Kennard expressed some level of resentment towards Deere and the manner in which he conducted his investigation. He was frustrated because Deere had gone to the media with everything he uncovered.
Yeah, the way the hair is sitting on it, it does kind of look like a head wrap. I agree, Danny. That's funny, though. That is funny.
Or believed, but he hadn't gone to the police. According to Kennard, that could damage their ability to prosecute someone in the future. He explained, quote, "If Deere, or somebody taking license with Deere's statements, said Morse was the end of the investigation, any viable suspect in the future would have the stain of us developing a suspect while Deere is pointing the finger at someone else entirely." End quote. The back and forth in the media continued throughout the month of January. Deere moved on to attack the investigation itself, saying that it had not been handled professionally, that evidence was not being stored properly, and that a primary reason he had even been hired was because local authorities didn't pursue the case for months and months at a time. Essentially, Deere claimed that the failure to solve the case or make any arrests was due to a poorly managed investigation, inexperienced officers, and a lack of interest in finding the answers. For their part, investigators entirely denied Deere's claims, with Lieutenant Finis Duval later saying, quote, "I'll just let our investigation stand. As for any stumbling blocks to his investigation, I don't know of any. I don't even know who his witnesses are. I would just like to see this case solved. I don't care who solves it." End quote. For his part, Mike Lowe also disagreed with Deer's statements and noted that he had been and continued to be doing everything he possibly could to work the case and find answers. He desperately wanted to find the suspect, to locate Bobo, and to provide the Shin family with as much justice and peace as he possibly could. He told the Springfield Leader and Press that more than 300 people had been interviewed in connection with the disappearance. Furthermore, he stated that approximately 50 different people had been considered suspects over the previous years, but all had been eventually ruled out. Showing his records, notes, and paperwork filed in an entire drawer of a filing cabinet, and interviews, sketches, incident reports, and other documents all housed in thick 2-inch binders. Unfortunately, Lowe noted, they were still not in a position to solve the case, but they would never stop pursuing it. Asked about the probability of Deer being correct and of Michael Morse actually being the person responsible, Lowe noted that he didn't believe that to be the case, but in reality, he couldn't know anything with a degree of certainty, saying, quote, "What he's got is a theory, and there are thousands of theories when it comes to this case. Hell, I've got a theory. Can I say no, Michael Morse did not do it? No, I'd be a fool if I said that. But do I doubt it? Yeah, I do. But I can't say for sure. Nobody can." End quote. Gresham Shin said that the family was frustrated by the lack of progress, referring to this time as the torment of not knowing. 1 month later, in February of 1980, local television station KATV Channel 7 presented a new series that would examine unsolved cases in the area. The show, debuting Monday, February 18th, was entitled Unsolved Mysteries, Leads, Legwork, and Legends. The show ran episodes Monday through Thursday and utilized actors and actual investigators to recreate the events of crimes. It was announced that Bobo's disappearance would be one of those stories covered, and executive producer Jim Pitcock visited Magnolia to interview investigators, witnesses, and friends.
And I knew I had seen this story before somewhere before YouTube, and I'm pretty sure that's it because I was obsessed. I still am with Unsolved Mysteries. I watch it all the time. So I'm pretty sure I did see this. I swear I did.
They also filmed at important locations from the case. Though unrelated to the case, it's worth noting that this Unsolved Mysteries show premiered 7 years prior to the one we're all familiar with. Despite exhaustive searching, I could not find a copy of Bobo's episode, but if you are in possession of it, please reach out because I would love to see it. I did manage to find some amazing archival footage of Bobo's studio, interviews with police, and images of the many, many composite sketches that were created, which I'll be sharing on YouTube and social media later in the week, but I digress. For the most part, the case sort of stalls out at this point in the early 1980s. While it remains active and Mike Lowe continues to investigate, very little is said publicly.
I know I have too, Dandy, and I've been sitting here all night trying to think about this. And I'm telling you, it had to have been, because I've watched just about every episode. Probably, in fact, when I'm done here, I'm probably going to go watch some more of it, of Unsolved Mysteries, because I follow those cases as well. It helps to find cold cases sometimes, and new cases, so on and so forth. And I love the show. I always have. But yeah, it's got to be from Unsolved Mysteries, in my opinion, because I know I've heard the story, and I can almost picture like the reenactment scene from it. It's crazy. So that's got to be it. And backing up a little bit, Cap says new technology will probably dive the case. Yeah. Good point. Danny's asking, do we know if there's any connection between the man that ended himself and Morris? I don't. I was wondering that myself. I'd have to go back and look a little bit more and reread some of this, because I kind of skim read the article to find the important points to know. And then I running this, it gives you this. So there might be, Danny. I don't know, but I was kind of thinking that myself too, a little bit earlier. Interesting. So I'm gonna go figure that one out too, if I might be able to, and I'll let you know if I do.
Publicly. There are searches carried out, but for the most part, investigators attempt to keep the precise locations hidden from the public, as they don't want to tip off a suspect or encourage locals to go searching in those areas by themselves. A large part of this time period is dedicated to chasing down the possibility that Bobo's disappearance is connected to other crimes in other states. Unable to track down someone local who may have been involved, investigators were involved in the questioning of a wide...
That's something else I wondered too, was could this person that was responsible for Bobo, is that maybe be responsible for some other cold cases from surrounding areas or within that area? I did definitely think that, and I'm still curious to that. And I would like to know if they have any leads that connect this to any other cases, truly, because it's interesting to me.
Wide number of different suspects. Some you've heard of, others who never really broke into the headlines. Among the names considered at different times are Robert Zanni, a violent criminal who targeted real estate agents throughout the late 70s in Texas and Oklahoma. The disappearance of several Louisiana women, including one taken from an Albertsons grocery store in broad daylight, led to discussions between Louisiana and Arkansas authorities about a probable link. The suspect in those cases fit closely to Bobo's, a bearded white male believed to be in his late 20s. The disappearance of Aria Vall out of Bossier Parish and the murder of Dodie Gay, a high school student, were connected to the area of that Albertsons, but neither case was ever solved.
And see, both of those I've heard. The Dodie Gay story I've looked into was something else I was going to cover at one time. And the other, Marie, I can't ever say her last name, but that one too. Both two cases that I saw. And again, were mentioned in the article that I read about this. And I'm curious if those two are linked at the very least. If not, are there more? You know, I'm definitely curious.
Shreveport Detective Lieutenant Donnie Nichols dismissed the possibility of any connection between their cases and Bobo's, noting that it appeared their suspect was specifically targeting an area and his victims didn't fit with any pattern related to the missing 25-year-old. Then there was the stabbing murder of real estate agent Gene McFall, which eventually was connected to James DeBartolabin, one of the most notorious serial killers and one of the United States' preeminent counterfeiters. Perhaps the most famous or infamous name to be considered in this investigation was Henry Lee Lucas. Investigators spent time questioning him and his frequent partner, Otis Toole.
And that's another case that I covered, was the Henry Lee Lucas situation, Otis Toole. Very good possibility. I looked at the... I actually thought about with this case, the oh my God. It's not the same. The person that committed the crimes in Texarkana, the reason why they made the movie The Town That Dreaded Sundown, that serial killer that was killing all those people back then. I thought about that case possibly. Maybe they changed up their MO or something like that. But yeah, there's a lot I've thought about with this. Bundy was active during this time, but not him. Right. I got you, Danny. Still, you know, it makes you think about other possibilities. So
Lucas was quickly ruled out, however, when it was determined that he was in police custody at the time of the disappearance.
Oh, don't worry about that, Butterfly. You are absolutely fine, dear. Don't ever apologize for anything like that, please. Thank you for joining us.
That, combined with the fact that the so-called confession killer denied ever entering southern Arkansas, made it mostly a wrap. There are, of course, always side stories to tell when it comes to alternate suspects or well-known killers being considered, and later this week I'll be releasing some bonus materials on Patreon, digging a little deeper into these men and their once considered associated crimes. In January of 1981, a 13th Judicial Circuit Court ruled against the family of Michael Morse in their lawsuit against William Deere. Both Deere and Tatum had been listed as defendants, but Tatum was released from the complaint by the plaintiff. By the time of the judgment, only Morse's widow Norma was still involved, as his mother, Corinne, tragically passed away in a car accident just a few months after.
That's a good point. tomboy, the I can't think of his name right now, but we just talked about it not too long ago from the Morgan Nick case. And it makes you wonder, because even if the MO is a little bit different, it's still when something like this goes on at the same time, and it's possibly first off in the same area, but it doesn't even necessarily have to be, because sometimes these people travel. You know what I mean? So yeah, good point, tomboy.
After the complaint was filed. 3 years later, in October of 1984, Gresham and Sue Shin sat for an interview with the Shreveport Journal, where they expressed their grief and frustration with the lack of developments, though they also noted that they were as dedicated as ever to finding their daughter and the person responsible for her disappearance. Even if it meant draining their bank accounts, selling off their properties, and going homeless, they were willing to do whatever it took. Sue struggled to understand why her daughter would have given a ride to the unknown caller unless perhaps she knew him. She explained, quote, "I just can't understand it. She just wasn't the type to pick up a stranger like that. She was always the most careful. Of the 7 or 8 or 9 little girls she grew up with, she was always the one that would want to walk on the right side of the street.
Exactly, Dan.
She was always the most careful. I feel like it had to be someone she knew." End quote. Gresham agreed that the common belief among the family and with investigators was that
And I agree, folks, wholeheartedly, that this is somebody that Mary either was an associate of, or she knew well. Okay, because I can't imagine with what's known about her, what the family has said about her, the lifestyle she lived, that she would pick somebody like that up. I don't see it. I just don't. This, in my opinion, is somebody close to her. Could be very close, to be honest with you. Or, and again, somebody that's out walking around freely right now. Now, I mean, it's been a long time now, so, but was. The odds that it's somebody she doesn't know are there. It's possible that somebody, could have talked her into picking them up or made her feel guilty or bad or whatever. But in my opinion, the odds are is that it very possibly, very strongly possibly, is somebody she knew. Oh, absolutely. They dedicated their whole life Sunday and all of their savings and everything to finding this child, which is so sad to me that they didn't even get closure, and they deserve it so much. You know what I mean? It's so very sad. That phone call that she said, if I don't, yeah, when she said that, like, if I don't come back, please come look for me. She knew something, okay? She knew. That's kind of scary to me. So yes, agreed, Sunday.
this was not a crime perpetrated by a drifter or some passerby. It wasn't a stranger who had simply wandered into town and randomly selected the name Bobo Shin. For the first time, Gresham revealed that there may have been evidence suggesting that in the weeks leading up to the crime, that his daughter was being stalked. On Thursday, July 6th, 2 weeks before the disappearance, one of the family's dogs got sick and died. 1 week later, on Thursday, July 13th, a week before the disappearance, the other dog got sick and died. Gresham explained, quote, "I wish we had done an autopsy on those dogs. Nothing was wrong with either of them. Then the smaller one, a Cocker Spaniel, the weaker one, got sick and died. Exactly a week later, the German Shepherd died." End quote. These new details certainly seem to suggest the possibility that someone may have been keeping an eye on Bobo and or the family home. If the dogs' deaths were likely the result of foul play, as is suggested, then it's difficult to ignore the likelihood that someone was on the family property on those days. At the same time, without autopsies and without knowing for sure, it's difficult to follow up on. Yes, someone could have poisoned the dogs, but at the same time, the dogs could have gotten into something toxic all on their own. 2 years later, in September of 1986, Sue Shin participated in another interview, this time with the Batesville Guard. She expressed frustration that investigators had in the past led them to believe that they were just about to break the case open, only for nothing to happen. She stated, quote, "Many times they led us to believe that they were right on the verge of something and we'd be on edge and they'd just go off on other things. It just hurts us so bad. It was like that all the way through." End quote. She noted that they had hired several private investigators only for nothing to be solved. Some, Sue said, preyed on their emotions and peeled large sums of money out of their pockets with a lot of promises that were never fulfilled. Several times they were told that their daughter had.
Yeah, good point. It wasn't as easy to check phone records like they do now, but good point, Cap. That's a very good point. If they check the phone records and we're able to trace it, like, I don't know if they could trace things like that then. I'm sure they had the ability to do it certain ways, landline tracing and stuff like that. But that's a good point. That's a very good.
Had been found, only for it to turn out to be a case of mistaken identity or some low-level scam to try and get some more reward money. According to Sue, one private investigator had them so convinced that he'd located Bobo that they sent their son Jay to pick her up, only for it to turn out to be a completely different woman. Asked about William Deere's investigation, Sue replied that he once mentioned to them that he would get $1 million worth of advertising if he could solve the case. She went on, quote, "That didn't make us feel very good, that he was doing it for his own glory. But of course, we wanted him to do it, and we were willing to pay, but it went on and on until we just couldn't." End quote. William Deere was the last investigator the family hired, with Sue noting they fired him after all of the publicity surrounding his actions failed to yield any new, solid, or pursuable information. To some degree, they believed that Deere did the best he could, and the family still harbored some belief that the rift between Deere and Mike Kennard likely undermined some of the investigation. Sue agreed that it became a political debate, and it was more about fame and money than finding answers. She explained, quote, "They just couldn't work together, even from the very first. They just were so afraid that somebody else was going to get the credit, they wouldn't tell each other things. That's the way we saw it."
That's horrible that all they're caring about is the credit, the clout that they're going to get from this rather than actually finding this woman. And that, to me, is probably another reason why this went cold. They were focused so much more on other things than actually finding her, which reminds me of another case, surprisingly enough. Even if they called from a payphone out of state, it would give another area to look into. 100%, Cap. That's a great point, too. I don't know how they traced things back then with the landlines the way they were, but I know they had to have the ability to do it. You know what I mean? 100%.
We couldn't get any satisfaction from anybody because they were all working against each other. End quote. Finally, it had all been.
Now tell me that don't sound like a case we're looking at right now. Even today, Sebastian Rogers' case is the same damn situation, in my opinion. It really is, and it's disgusting. Hello there, my Brian. Good to see you, bra guy. Thank you for joining us, buddy. I hope you're doing good today.
Become too much for them. In a family meeting, Sue and Gresham called in their children and expressed that they had done everything they possibly could, and it was time to leave the mystery in God's hands. They had no intentions of forgetting or dismissing Bobo, nor would they ignore breaks in the case or new developments, but it was slowly killing them, spending every waking moment one.
That's exactly who I was just thinking about, too. I'm not even going to give him the grace of saying his name out loud, but yes. Yes, 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 Tomboy. You know exactly who we're talking about. 100%. Licensed or not, he was a piece of shit. Fake as all hell. And all he cared about was money. He didn't care about anything else. And still probably doesn't. I don't even know how he was licensed. It makes me sick to think about him. But yes, absolutely, Tomboy. Absolutely. Well, thank you so very much, Mr. Brian. Gifting the membership there. I don't see who got it right now, but congratulations. Welcome back to the sauce, or to the sauce if it's your first time. We appreciate that so much, Brian. So generous, so gracious, and welcome to the new member, the new meatball. We appreciate you. As soon as I find out, I will definitely let you know. Oh, good stuff. Good to hear, Brian. Good to hear. Again, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that so much. You have no idea.
Wondering if today would be the day. Sue acknowledged that for years after the disappearance,
Thank you, Tomboy. Congrats, CJ, and welcome back to the Thoughts. I'm pretty sure CJ was in the Thoughts before. Congrats, and a new meatball, or a renewed meatball with CJ Sky. Thank you again so much, Brian. That's so much appreciated.
Appearance, she refused to leave the family home in case somebody called. The only way she'd go out anywhere was if they had someone else to sit by the phone for her. The case had worn on both of them physically, affecting their mental and physical health. Both suffered from issues with their hearts, and the tremendous grief and pain did little to assuage it. Sue explained it wasn't a choice, but more a necessity, saying, quote, "It's not that we've given up, and not that we wouldn't do anything we could do. Any of us would, but we just couldn't keep on," end quote. Sadly, just 3 months after this interview, on Tuesday, December 16th, Gresham James Shin passed away at the age of 70. He had hoped to know the truth of Bobo's fate before his time was up, but his family believes that after shuffling off this mortal coil and into God's grace, he's been reunited with his beloved daughter. Gresham Shin was laid to rest in Magnolia's Memorial Park Cemetery following a service held at Central Baptist Church. July 20th, 1992 marked 14 years since Bobo was last seen. For nearly a decade, there had been little, if anything, stated by police about the continued investigation. On that harrowing anniversary, lead investigator Mike Lowe, who took over the case 12 years earlier, participated in a thorough and deeply probing interview. Lowe stated that the investigation had taken them all around the country, pursuing leads in states as far away as Florida, California, and New York. Though it was believed that Bobo had likely been killed, it was still being investigated as a kidnapping because they hadn't found a body. The case was still active, Lowe said, but they hadn't found much, saying, quote, "There's not a month that goes by where we don't check on something involved in the case, and we are still looking into new leads that come up, but so far, we have come across nothing concrete."
Exactly, Dandy. Botched and bad from the beginning.
The family continued to be haunted by the unknown, though each person took their own measures to protect their heart and sanity. While Sue's Shin acknowledged the likelihood Bobo was deceased, she wasn't ready to commit herself to that, believing there was still some semblance of a chance. For Bobo's older sister Linda, however, all those years of unknowing were too difficult to navigate. She stated, quote, "In my mind, I have decided that she is dead. It's just been hard on the whole family because everything has led to a dead end, and nothing we have found out so far has led to anything. It's a total mystery," end quote. For the first time during this interview, Lowe revealed one of the more prominent theories developed among investigators. While there had been a lot of talk about this being an outsider, not someone who walked the streets of Magnolia or grew up alongside Bobo, Lowe did not necessarily agree. 14 years of investigating later, and for the most part, detectives agreed that Bobo was probably targeted from someone in the area. Lowe believed there was a chance this was a case of kidnapping gone wrong. The Shin family was well known, they had money, and it was entirely possible someone saw an opportunity and planned to abduct Bobo and demand ransom from the family. For one reason or another, something went wrong, and what began as a kidnapping transformed into a murder. Lowe noted that Magnolia is a small town with approximately 12,000 residents, and while not everyone knew one another, the Easy Mart, where Bobo picked up the caller, was the one spot in town where almost everyone local would stop in at least on a weekly basis. At the same time, the witnesses there who had gotten the most detailed look at the unknown man admitted to investigators that they didn't recognize him, nor did they believe they had ever seen him before. Unfortunately, while interesting, it does little to lend credence one way or the other when it comes to a local or a stranger. Lowe couldn't be sure, saying, quote, "I think, and sure as I say this, it'll turn out that some serial killer in Oregon did it. I think that the key is right here. I'd bet on it. I think it was somebody who knew the lay of the land, who knew how far it was from the Easy Mart to the house to her art studio, someone who knew how long it would take for her to get there," end quote.
And I kind of have to agree with that. I definitely don't think this was, I mean, it's possible that it's a stranger that wasn't from that area. It's possible, but to do things the way it was done, to me, it's somebody that is familiar with the area and that knows her very, very possibly, and that has the whole thing. You know, they know it very well, and that is my opinion. Again, every time I hear that name, Bobo, yes, me too. Me too. It's funny you said that, Kev. I was thinking it earlier. Bobo, the guy from the Bigfoot show. Yes, that's hilarious. I agree. It was a local that knew the area. I mean, it just makes sense, Dandy. You know what I mean? It does. It makes sense to be able to do these things in the amount of time, the order, and how it just does. In my opinion, it just does.
Lowe also wondered about the infamous last statement of Bobo Shin. Come looking for me if I'm not back this afternoon. Was that just...
And see, that's something else to you guys. Come looking for me if I'm not back this afternoon. It almost makes me feel like she knew that person and knew that that person has the propensity to possibly do something they shouldn't do to her. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you recognize Dago Charge? Oh, I got you, Brian. You're funny. Yeah, right, Butterfly, right. So that statement alone is what really makes me think she knows that this person, or she knows the person well enough to know that they make her uncomfortable. If it was a stranger, I don't. First off, I don't think she would interact that way. Second off, again, I think she probably would have taken somebody with her. So, that's my thought. I don't know what you mean, Brian. X not want to let you go, or just being a jerk. Oh, I'm sorry.
The joke Bobo made, or did it suggest that perhaps she didn't feel completely safe or comfortable with the caller?
Right.
Did that statement imply it was someone she knew or knew of, perhaps someone who was a little off, someone who wasn't exactly balanced? Lowe wondered aloud if perhaps it was someone she went to school with or knew through friends, someone quiet, sad, maybe someone she had been kind to, or contrarily, someone who expressed an interest in her that she may have ignored. Maybe it was someone who freaked her out a little bit.
That's possible.
Sent a shiver down her spine, or maybe that last sentence was just a joke that ironically turned out to be legitimate. The biggest stumbling block for Lowe was the fact that Bobo gave this person a ride. Her family is convinced she would not give a stranger a ride, and it seems unlikely she'd be willing to take the 10-mile trip out along the Taylor Highway with a total stranger, especially one that gave her weird vibes, but one can never know. Bobo was known to be an extremely kind and giving person, the kind of person that someone with ill intentions might be skilled at manipulating or luring into a trap. Lowe also noted that years later, they still weren't really certain about the composite that had been the most publicized. The one based on the carpenter's eyewitness account. Was it accurate? Was he mistaken? Did he see exactly what he explained, or was he possibly mixing up different visits to the home on different days with different...
You know, Dandy, I was thinking that too a little bit. What if the person forced her, maybe by gunpoint or something, into the car? You know what I mean? What if that was the case? That's a whole different story, and that's not really being looked at or touched upon in that sense. So that's truly, or, you know, there was some form of a threat that forced her to take this person. That's another theory that I haven't heard them really like lean into at all. It's kind of just saying, you know what I mean?
From people. Former lead investigator Russell Welsh noted that it isn't like the movies or TV and how they show things. Composite drawings aren't meant to be the be-all, end-all when it comes to finding your perp. He explained, quote, composite drawings aren't meant to identify anyone. They're only supposed to eliminate suspects. But from the time that drawing hit the newspapers, we were deluged with calls. Everybody had seen this guy in the car next to them, at the stoplight, at the grocery store.
But again, I'm sure they have, because in 1978, that guy looked like everybody, guys. So of course you saw him.
He was all over the place. He was everywhere. End quote. For Welch, he felt they had done everything they possibly could, and from his first 10 months on the case to Lowe taking over for the later 12 years, they worked every angle, every possibility, but they could never get enough to move forward, file a charge, or even directly name a probable suspect. That's just how investigations go sometimes, he commented, saying, quote, there are basically just two ways to investigate, although everybody has his own style. You can sit up at night and think about it, try to put yourself in the place of whoever did this and come up with theories, or you can follow the facts and the evidence and go where they lead you. Sometimes you don't have enough facts, enough evidence to reach a conclusion. That doesn't mean it was a...
I mean, that's a good point, Cap. But like I said, it could have been somebody that she knew of. Not as much knew personally, but maybe just knew of, and had a bit of a, somebody that had like maybe a negative or a bad reputation from the area, and she was uncomfortable slightly with that person. Didn't really know them like personally, but knew of them and what the propensity that they could be possibly. You know what I mean? That's a possibility. Okay, good to hear, Brian. Good to hear, sir.
A bad investigation. End quote. For their part, at least, the Shin family has stood up for Mike Lowe, expressing their belief that he did everything he possibly could and continues to. Speaking to the Magnolia Banner News in April of 2011, 33 years after the disappearance, Bobo's brother Jay stated, quote, we are particularly grateful to Mike Lowe for continuing to work on this case for so many years. We are deeply appreciative of his efforts to bring a resolution to it and to check out any information. End quote. 2 months later, on Friday, June 12th, Mike Lowe, 3 Columbia County Sheriff's Office investigators, and 2 trustees, along with employees of a private drilling company, spent much of their morning excavating an old water well in the area near to Lake Columbia, northwest of Magnolia. Lowe requested that the media not reveal the exact location, but specified that the drill site was within, quote, an area of interest to investigators. The site was within close proximity to the former dirt and gravel road where Harry Irwin saw what he believed to be Bobo's blue car veering back and forth the afternoon she vanished. The area has changed a lot over the years, but the location searched is described as approximately 3 miles, as the crow flies, from where Irwin spotted the car. That road is now a part of AR 344, which travels close to Lake Columbia's eastern shore. Lowe noted that the well they were drilling and the nearby abandoned home are surrounded by a type of grass similar to that found on the floorboards of Bobo's car the night she vanished. Bones were recovered at the site, but following an analysis, it was determined that they were not human. They hadn't expected to find much, but it was a location Lowe walked all the way back in the late 70s, and to this day remains a place that they believe could be connected to the case. Their failure to find anything does add up over time, and Lowe often feels frustrated thinking that maybe they'll never find an answer. He explained, quote, what I fear is the only way we're going to find her is if somebody walks us to it and says, right here. And that somebody may be dead by now, but we're going.
I've heard of other people doing stuff like that too, Cap. You know what I mean? It's understandable. And that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why she went and did this on her own. Making the statement she made tells me she was uncomfortable. Okay? If that's the case, just take somebody with you. Why didn't you take somebody with you? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. That's wild to me. I don't get it. But why would law enforcement check local wells if they thought this was a rando passing through? That's something only local would know. See? I think they were thinking both directions, Dandy, truly. I think some were thinking one direction, the others were thinking the other direction, and that's my opinion, but yeah. Right. Right. You guys are right.
Going to keep on trying. End quote.
And Tomboy says it's because it's small town America in 1978 and not a lot of fear back then. That's true too. That's true too. There wasn't compared to what we have now, and for good reason. So yeah, good points. Very good points, you guys.
Lowe left his position with the state police, but continued.
Brian, we don't know. It was just a sketch. It's a guy with dark hair and a beard. I mean, it's hard to tell.
To work the case. He eventually ran for and was elected as Columbia County Sheriff. One of his first actions was to take all of the available evidence in the case and ship it out to the state crime lab and the FBI for a thorough analysis in the hopes that maybe they might be able to lift the suspect's DNA. Whether or not a full or partial profile was developed has never been revealed. Lowe also reached out to the FBI for assistance specifically from the Forensic Sciences Unit, but given the limited information in the case, they were not able to develop a profile of a potential suspect. On Saturday, October 6, 2012, Sue Shin passed away at the age of 93. Her obituary notes that she was preceded in death by her husband, Gresham.
See, it sounds to me like that poor lady hung on as long as she could to try to get some kind of justice or see something for her child, and sadly didn't get it. Neither one of them did. That's really sad.
But there is no mention of Bobo. Even to her last days, 34 years after her daughter's disappearance, she refused to believe that she was truly gone, holding out hope beyond hope that somehow, one way or another.
Where's your guy, Brian? You tell me if he's good looking.
She would learn the truth. Tragically, the answers are yet to be found, and Sue was laid to rest beside Gresham in Magnolia's Memorial Park Cemetery. 2 years later, on Saturday, July 19th, 2014, one day before the 36th anniversary of Bobo's disappearance, her siblings and living family members made the decision to finally hold a memorial service for her. They had not done so throughout their parents' lives because neither could accept that she was truly gone, and it felt like giving up to them to hold a service. This service was held at Central Baptist Church, and countless friends, family members, and schoolmates got up to speak about Bobo, celebrating the joy they shared with her and mourning the loss of a truly gifted, kind, and caring young woman. Southern Arkansas University established a Master of Arts in Teaching scholarship in Bobo's name, and they continue to award it each year. They accept donations towards the scholarship both on their website and via mail, and I'll be sure to include a link in the show notes. A tombstone was erected in the cemetery near to Bobo's parents, which simply reads, "Mary Jimmy Bobo Shin, forever loved by family, forever cherished by friends." Present at that memorial was Mike Lowe, who was still working the case in whatever capacity he could. Even after retiring as sheriff, he was allowed to work the case by the new sheriff, and when necessary, he's given access to deputies to conduct police actions and searches. The next year, in January of 2015, Lowe decided to restart the investigation from the beginning. He relied only on what solid evidence they had obtained, dismissing other less reliable clues, such as the carpenter's eyewitness account. He began re-interviewing witnesses, getting their statements down on video, and he sent out more information to FBI profilers in hopes of developing some lead, no matter how minor. To this day, Lowe still works the case, marking 45 years that he has been involved in this investigation. In a 2023 interview, Lowe stated that he continues to receive information and pursues all leads. In what can only be described as a shocking revelation, Lowe told the Banner News that he has managed to narrow his list of suspects down to just one, and that person is still alive and living in Columbia County. Asked about the case all those years later, Lowe replied, quote, "Usually, you'll have an ex-wife or a girlfriend or a kid or a friend who'll come in and say, they heard so-and-so say something about a crime. You'll have somebody in jail and their cellmate will confess something to them, and they'll trade that information for stuff like cigarettes or radios. More crimes get solved through jailhouse confessions than any other way. That's almost always how it works. Somebody talks. And if two people know, we're fixing to solve the thing because sooner or later, one of them will confide in somebody or drink too much and let something slip or cut a deal to save themselves. We haven't had any of that. Nobody has talked. Whoever did this, he didn't tell a soul. And he was incredibly lucky because apparently nobody really saw him and law enforcement didn't have a lot to go on. You know that old saying about looking for a needle in a haystack? We're still looking for the haystack. If we can find the haystack, then we can start looking for the needle. I've got 2 other cases that are still unsolved, but this one, well, I've retired from the state police and I can't be sheriff forever. And this is the one I want to put a cap on before I go home for the last time. I will never give up. Long as I'm living, I'll keep looking for her. End quote. When last seen, Mary Jimmy Bobo Shin was described as being a white female with brown hair and eyes, standing 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing approximately 118 pounds. Bobo has a scar on her left cheek and a birthmark on her forehead. She was last seen driving her custom blue 1976 Buick Special.
Yes, that is true. Sheriff Lowe did have and sent evidence to the FBI in hopes for DNA testing, which could be done at this point, and I'm curious where it is and what they're doing. So, good points. Thanks for throwing that up there, Cap. Seriously, that's a good point.
In the area of Magnolia, Arkansas on Thursday, July 20th, 1978.
I agree, Butterfly.
There is no description or accounting for what clothing Bobo was wearing that day. However, it has been confirmed that she wore a custom-designed gold necklace with 3 diamond pendants. It has never been recovered. Bobo is believed to have picked up an unknown man at the Easy Mart in downtown.
Yeah, imagine that, Jana. It's too bad they couldn't have been involved in your case, you know? Very sad. That makes me feel bad. Jeez. Hey, Mikey. Good to see you, bub.
Town Magnolia that morning, possibly stopped at the house she had for sale at 718 East McNeil Street and may have been spotted driving in the Taylor Highway area west of town. At the time of her disappearance, Bobo was 25 years old, and if alive today, she would now be 72. Asked about his older sister, decades later, Jay Shin still felt the sparkle of a smile memories of his sister brought not just to him, but everyone who had the pleasure to have known her and the honor to have loved and been loved by her. Jay stated, quote, "Her legacy is the memories of her art, and the effect she had on her students she taught in Magnolia. I know it sounds kind of trite, but I would like people to just remember she was a good person. The hard part is just imagining where she would be in her life 30 years later. When I think about what I've done in 30 years, it just seems real unfair that her life was cut short. I think about the person she would be now. I encourage anyone who knew anything about it, if they do, to talk to Mike Lowe at this time. If there was something that they knew back then that they didn't bring forward, if they would now for our family's peace of mind. There is really no closure to it until you know what happened. I think our family handled it through faith that she was going to be okay wherever she was. And that's really the only way to look at it, whether she's alive or whether she's in heaven, that she has peace. We feel like we might eventually find out what happened. We're also kind of resigned to the fact that this is kind of the way life is. We don't know if we will ever have an answer.
So sad. Very, very, very sad, you guys. I wish. Hold on a minute. Sorry. I wish that there was more that came from this. The sheriff and this Mike Lowe has been like so dedicated to this whole thing. You know what I mean? Good golly, Miss Molly. Yes. Oh, there are, Cap. There really are a lot in Arkansas. There's more to this, guys, but this is a long one. So I really I didn't want to drag you guys anymore. I'm sure most people are probably falling out on me, but there's more. There were some there, and if you listen through the story, there weren't a whole lot of suspects. Okay, there are some that we can come back to this again and go into it a little bit more because there is more to it. But like I said, it's so long. Very interesting to me. I read the whole thing and I was just like, wow, I think they would love this. And it's still because it's been so long. Both her parents are gone. I mean, she would be 70, guys. That says it right there. Okay. 71, whatever. But still, nothing at all. And it just, to me, her legacy deserves an answer. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? There deserves to be an answer to what the hell happened to her. It's crazy. There's been nothing and nobody that has ever been put in front of the light. It's just wild. Yes. Dandy says, I'd like to believe that upon death we're at peace and it's the loved ones that aren't. And that's very true, Dandy. I do fully agree with you. It is Sunday. It's really interesting to me and very fascinating. I agree with you too. Like I said, I thought you guys might enjoy the mystery behind it and wanting to know as well about these cases. You know what I'm saying? I don't like using the word entertaining in stuff like this because it's a horrific thing, and there's suffering and misery that are behind this, but they're interesting to me. You know what I mean? That's my thing. Cold cases have always been unsolved mysteries are always interesting to me. In a sense, and I feel guilty saying it again, it is kind of entertaining to the based on the interest that I have with the mystery of it. That's what it is. So, and I've always been involved in that and always wanted to solve these things. I wanted to be a detective. When I was a kid, being law enforcement like my dad, my father, my grandfather, my uncle, and all that didn't work out, but that's always been my thing. So this is the closest I get. You know what I mean? Just saying. Well, right, Brian. Right. Absolutely. So I don't know, guys. Well, like I said, there's more to this that we'll come back to at a later date. It's just been so long and with nothing, and it's sad. It's just so sad to me. So that does it, guys. That's going to do it for tonight. I've kept you guys here with me too long. We're at 3 hours now on this one. I didn't think it was going to go that long, but it did. Tomboy says, I'm still researching the Inbo Patron. Oh, Patron. Yeah, definitely. There's more. I got more coming. So, oh yeah, I did promise you guys. Hold on a minute here. Let me see. Hold on 1 minute here. Bear with me.
If you're a YouTuber and you want to save hours managing your library, you need to. Come check out how you don't sit back.
One more. So I promised you guys this morning that if I could find it, I would show it to you. So I have the interview now, the new interview with the Proudfoots in regards to Sebastian Rogers' case. I figure it's not too long, so I figure we could finish this up with this together, and we can go from there. Maybe we can talk about it tomorrow. It's coming. It's coming this weekend. I promise you, Molly. I am making a solemn promise. Saturday, we are covering the Anunnaki. Sorry, I never say it right. So tune in this Saturday evening, Anunnaki, for Scary Saturdays. This is exactly what we're looking at. So that is a solemn promise, no matter what. Unless, of course, I don't make it and I'm dead. Knock on wood. That's the only way we're not doing it. Just telling you guys. If you're interested in that, we will be doing it Saturday night. All right, so let's check this interview out real quick here, and then I'll let you guys go.
1 year later. Tonight, in my one-on-one with Katie and Chris Proudfoot, you'll hear about the unwavering hope this family is clinging to and their message to you as they vow they will never give up in the search for their son.
It's a living nightmare, to be honest with you.
The teen with
Thank you, Molly.
disappeared from his mom and stepdad's Hendersonville home in the overnight hours of February 26th.
What would you say to him when he walked in that door? Oh, God, I don't even know if I'd be able to speak. I'd probably bulldoze him down with hugs. Honestly, when I picture that, I just picture being able to hug him, to hold him, to smell him. I mean, just to be able to hear his voice, to hear his laugh.
The teen with autism disappeared from his mom and stepdad's Hendersonville home in the overnight hours of February 26th.
We do believe there's a chance it is Sebastian. We're just trying to find out if that could be the case.
Steve Fisher, a private investigator hired by Katie and Chris Proudfoot, says this video that first aired on WSMV4 could be a new lead in the ongoing search for Sebastian. Video from the night Sebastian disappeared.
We went through over 100 hours of surveillance, and it wasn't until the third pass through the surveillance that we even spotted this person. And there's a person at 12:17 a.m. in the same neighborhood that Sebastian's from, that walks southbound in the neighborhood, goes behind a vehicle. It appears that they're trying to stay out of sight of another person that's walking their dog, and then doubles back after it's clear.
Fisher says he's working to learn if that person wearing dark clothing in the video is accounted for in the investigation.
It actually gives us more rejuvenated hope that we may actually be onto something. We just have to run it down.
Over the last 12 months, emergency responders and volunteers spent hundreds of hours searching for the missing teen. Drone mapping, ground searches, scent dogs, and the scouring of surveillance video.
Why do you think Sebastian is still missing?
That's tough to say. I mean, it was the largest manhunt in Tennessee history for a child. And absolutely zero evidence.
And you know what, you guys? That statement right there, he's right. It was the largest manhunt in Tennessee history. They looked more than once in the same place. They found no evidence of his clothing, of remains. They found nothing, you guys, which tells me in my mind and in my gut, this child is still alive and somebody has him. That is exactly what I have thought because of those reasons right there. And it just doesn't, it won't go away, guys. There's been times where I've thought that, and the more we get into a case, it goes away, and I start thinking, okay, maybe not. I don't know that he's with us any longer, so on and so forth. I really, really, as much as I've thought about that being a possibility, my gut says it's not with this one, which is why I'm still very obsessed with it. Very passionate about it. That statement right there is why I believe that Sebastian Wayne Drake Rogers is alive, and somebody's holding him. He's with somebody, in my absolute opinion, folks. I'm just saying.
There's nothing out there Law enforcement's working due diligently. They are working hard over and over and over.
What do you want to say to anyone out there who wants to say that one of you could have something to do with Sebastian's disappearance?
I would say to pause and to think, and I would say to consider the sources of information.
Hey,
Try to
Candy.
make sure that you're getting legitimate information. Avoid the rumors.
Katie and Chris say they're determined to bring their son home and want the community to stay focused.
I want to ask everyone not to forget, and I want to encourage people to keep helping and to keep bringing awareness, not only to our son, but to all of the missing children, because they all deserve to go home.
And if Sebastian's out there listening, I asked Katie what she'd want to say to him.
I would say that
Sorry, Tomboy. I said that that statement there that Chris made is what makes me truly feel in my gut that Sebastian Rogers is alive. They have found no video proof. They found no physical proof. There's been no clothing found, no remains found, no scent to anywhere. No, nothing has been found. Nothing. In a year, okay? In a year. And like I said, this was the largest manhunt in Tennessee history. They searched multiple places at the same time. They went through so many different things, okay? And that is what makes me in my gut believe that Sebastian is alive and that he is, somebody's holding him somewhere. That's how I feel on this. Truly. Chris, that statement right there, Tomboy, that Chris made when he said it was the largest manhunt in Tennessee history, and that there was absolutely nothing found. Nothing. That statement is what made me believe, or makes me believe that. Sorry.
know that we all love you and that there are so many people that care and so many people that are looking, and hang in there and know that we're going to find you, know that we're going to bring you home.
Investigating agencies say Sebastian's mom, stepdad, and biological father have fully cooperated, and there's no evidence to support foul play. Now, we also contacted law enforcement about the video in our story. The Sumner County Sheriff's Office told us that law enforcement had possession of the original video that the private investigator says is new since 72 hours after Sebastian was reported missing. And after thoroughly investigating this lead, they determined it has no relevance to the case. Now, you can watch my full interview with Katie and Chris Proudfoot on our WSMV4 app. Holly Thompson, WSMV4.
The Amber Alert for Sebastian Rogers is still active, and the Sumner County Sheriff's Office says they're still looking for him. The sheriff posted on Facebook that his team is still following every lead and analyzing all evidence. The sheriff's office says there have been no confirmed sightings of Sebastian, but they haven't stopped trying to find him. They ask anyone with information to call TBI tip line.
And that's it right there. And I agree with you, Tomboy. They're gonna flip, spin, and turn this inside out, and it's gonna get bad. It's just bad. The whole thing is bad. I don't know, you guys, but I pray. I've been praying. It's a year. I pray to God that whoever, in my opinion, has him, lets him go. That would make my whole year. It really would. I feel really strongly, especially now. I don't know why, but really strongly. I have always felt that he's still here with us and that somebody's holding him. And I think they just need to let him go. Stop what, Tomboy? What do I do now? What's in the corner by my China hutch? That's where the dog food bowls are. And there's two bags sitting there. One of them holds the dog food. The other one is just like a gift bag. And the dogs like to go over there and move around a lot if you saw something. Well, hello, Miss Tandy. Thank you for being here. Get some rest, and we appreciate you. I hope you're feeling okay too. Yeah, that's all that's over there. Why, did you see something, Tomboy? Don't be freaking me out. Oh, no, the bag. The bag has stripes on the side of the gift bag, yeah. There's gnomes all around this house, though. You wouldn't be wrong. Just saying. All right, y'all. That's going to do it for today, for tonight. I think Mom probably will be, Mind of Monsters will be live here at 8:30 Eastern time, it would be. So coming up here soon. Her and Miss Kimber. I'll probably end up in there eventually, but I got to do some stuff here. I'm pretty sure she'll be there. So, guys, go check it out. If you have nothing else to do, of course, show some love and support over there for her. And I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your night. Don't forget to love yourselves and love each other. Oh, hold on, Brian. Hold on. 1 second, bud. There we go. There is her link right there. Thank you again, Walt, for your donation to the cash link there. I appreciate that very much, my friend. Thank you guys all so much for being here and supporting this. And please make sure to hit the like button on the way out if you could, if you enjoyed the content, of course, and share it if you will. I hope to see you guys sometime tomorrow morning and or tonight over at Mom's, of course, with her and Miss Kimber tonight, if they're still doing it. I do believe they are. Other than that, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your night. You guys are the beautiful people. Don't forget to love yourselves and love each other, and don't change a thing, because you are the beautiful people. Much love to you all. God bless. Good night, and I will see you guys soon.
Typing at the speed of light, hunting down the shadows, bringing wrongs to right, digging deep in the data, facts sharp as a knife. With every single story, he's fighting for a life. A voice for the voiceless, he won't stay quiet. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. Streaming loud and clear, cracking cases open, hearts filled with fear. His channel's a beacon in a world gone wrong. He guides us through the chaos, a soldier so strong. The clicks and the likes, they follow his lead. With every new case, he plants a new seed. Sharing their stories, giving hope where it fades. Daniel's a warrior through the trials he waves. In a world of silence, he shouts out their names. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. From the shadows he rises, streaming loud and clear. True crime revelation shining through the night. With every victim story, he pulls at the strings. A hero in the darkness, hear the truth he brings. Daniel's got the fire igniting the fight. True crime revelation shining through the night. With everything